The wine glass shattered against marble before anyone could stop it. 30 seconds earlier, billionaire Nathaniel Cross had just humiliated a waitress in front of Chicago's most powerful executives, mocking her intelligence, her education, everything. But when Lily Hart turned around and corrected him in flawless French, then explained the chemistry of the $5,000 wine he'd just insulted her over, the entire room went silent. What happened next changed both their lives forever. If you want to see how a single moment of cruelty became an unexpected love story, stay until the end. Drop a like, comment your city, and let's see how far this story travels. The dining room at Aurelia smelled like old money and new ambition, a combination of truffle oil, aged leather, and the particular cologne wealthy men wore when they wanted everyone to remember they'd arrived. Nathaniel Cross sat at the head of a table built for kings, surrounded by 8 business associates who laughed at his jokes whether they were funny or not. That was the thing about having $3 billion. Everything you said became hilarious. He didn't particularly enjoy these dinners anymore. Hadn't for years. But they were necessary. Part of the performance. Part of maintaining the empire he'd built from his father's failing pharmaceutical company into a healthcare technology giant that employed 14,000 people across 6 continents. At 32, Nathaniel had accomplished what most men spend entire lifetimes chasing. He had the penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the private jet, the invitations to rooms where actual decisions got made. And he had his son, 7-year-old Marcus, who was probably at home right now with the nanny, asking when Daddy would be back. Always asking when Daddy would be back. Nathaniel pushed the thought away and reached for his water glass, nodding as Gerald Hutchins, CEO of a medical device manufacturer Nathaniel was quietly acquiring, continued his story about a disastrous yacht trip in the Mediterranean. The other executives were performing their assigned roles, laughing, commiserating, establishing the comfortable rhythm of men who'd already decided to do business together and were now just enjoying the ceremony of it. That's when he noticed her. The waitress approaching their table moved differently than the others. Quieter. Almost apologetic in the way she carried the wine bottles, like she was trying not to disturb the important people having important conversations. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed determined to look anywhere except directly at the guests she served. Nathaniel watched her set down a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2005 with careful hands. She wore the same black uniform as the other servers, but hers seemed slightly too large, like she'd lost weight recently or borrowed it from someone else. There was something about her whole demeanor that screamed invisibility, like she'd perfected the art of being present without being noticed. It annoyed him, though he couldn't say exactly why. "Excuse me," Robert Chen, Nathaniel's CFO, gestured toward the bottle. "We ordered the 2009, not the 2005. The waitress's face went carefully blank. "I apologize. Let me check with—" No, Nathaniel interrupted, his voice carrying that particular edge of amusement that preceded humiliation. The table's attention shifted toward him. He could feel it, that familiar pull of power. "Let me guess. You just brought whatever was closest, didn't you? Probably can't even tell the difference between a 2005 and a 2009. They're both just expensive bottles to you." Silence dropped over the table like a curtain. The waitress, her name tag read Lily, met his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, Nathaniel saw something flicker across her face. Not anger, not embarrassment. Something else entirely. Something that looked almost like disappointment. "The 2005 Margaux," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the color rising in her cheeks, "is actually a superior vintage in most collectors' opinions. The 2009 is excellent, absolutely, but the 2005 has more complexity in the tannin structure. The harvest that year benefited from an unusually warm September, which created more phenolic ripeness in the Cabernet Sauvignon grapes." She paused, and Nathaniel felt something cold settle in his chest. "But you're right," Lily continued, her tone remaining perfectly professional. "You did order the 2009, and that was my mistake. I'll bring the correct bottle immediately. Would you like me to decant it, or would you prefer to let it breathe naturally for another 20 minutes before serving?" The silence became absolute. Nathaniel stared at her. So did everyone else at the table. This shy, quiet waitress who'd been practically invisible 30 seconds ago had just demonstrated more knowledge about wine than half the people sitting here, and she'd done it without a trace of smugness or satisfaction, just stating facts, correcting the error. Moving on. Gerald Hutchins broke first, his laugh booming across the private dining room. "Well, I'll be damned. The lady knows her wine. Apparently better than some of us," added James Morrison, Nathaniel's head of operations, shooting his boss a look that contained the smallest hint of reproach. Lily didn't wait for further commentary. She simply picked up the 2005 bottle with the same careful hands and disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving Nathaniel sitting there feeling like he'd just been dressed down by someone who technically worked for him, or at least for the establishment currently serving him. "Rough," Robert muttered under his breath. Nathaniel didn't respond. He was still processing what had just happened, his mind replaying those 2 seconds when she'd looked at him. That expression, not fear or intimidation, disappointment, like she'd expected better and found exactly what she'd predicted instead. It bothered him more than it should have. The conversation resumed around him, but Nathaniel had lost the thread of it. His attention kept drifting toward the kitchen doors, waiting for Lily to return. When she finally did, carrying the correct vintage along with a decanter, her movements were just as quiet, just as careful as before. But now Nathaniel couldn't stop watching her. She decanted the wine with practiced precision, her hands steady as she tilted the bottle and let the deep red liquid flow smoothly into the crystal vessel. No sediment, no splashing, perfect control. Then she stepped back, waiting to see if anyone needed anything else, her eyes fixed on a point roughly 3 feet above Nathaniel's head. "Thank you," he found himself saying. Lily's gaze dropped to his face for just a moment. "You're welcome." Then she was gone again, moving to another table across the room where a different set of wealthy diners required attention. Nathaniel watched her go, aware that Robert was studying him with barely concealed curiosity. "You good?" Robert asked quietly. "Fine." "Because you just apologized to a waitress for being an asshole, which I don't think I've ever witnessed in the 6 years I've worked for you." Nathaniel picked up his water glass. "I wasn't being an asshole. You were absolutely being an asshole. She brought the wrong wine. And then she educated you about why the wine she brought was actually better, while somehow making you look like an ignorant prick without ever raising her voice or changing her expression. That," Robert said, raising his own glass in a small salute, "was masterful." Gerald leaned forward, grinning. "I like her. She's got spine." "She's a waitress," Nathaniel said, more sharply than intended. "So?" James Morrison had been mostly quiet during dinner, but now he fixed Nathaniel with a look. "Your grandfather was a coal miner. Your dad started in a pharmacy counting pills. Since when do you judge people by what they do for a living?" Nathaniel didn't have a good answer for that. Because James was right. Nathaniel's entire family history was built on people working their way up from nothing. His grandfather had died of black lung disease at 53. His father had put himself through pharmacy school while working overnight shifts at a factory. The Cross family fortune was only 2 generations old, built on sweat and stubbornness and the kind of grinding determination that came from knowing what poverty actually felt like. And here he was, mocking a woman for serving wine. When had he become this person? The dinner continued. Deals were discussed in vague terms that would become concrete in morning meetings. Scotch was poured. Dessert arrived, something architectural and French that probably cost more than Lily made in a week. Nathaniel participated in all of it, said the right things, made the right connections, played his role perfectly. But part of his attention never left the quiet waitress moving through the dining room like a ghost. He noticed things now, the way she seemed to anticipate what guests needed before they asked. The small notebook that occasionally appeared from her apron pocket when she thought no one was watching, filled with what looked like handwritten notes. The fact that when an older couple at a corner table spoke to her in what sounded like Italian, she responded fluently without hesitation. Who was this woman? Around 9:30, Pierre Beaumont arrived at their table. Pierre was a French investor Nathaniel had been courting for months, a silver-haired industry legend who controlled enough European pharmaceutical distribution to make or break Nathaniel's expansion plans. They'd arranged to meet for drinks after dinner, and Pierre had shown up exactly on time, impeccably dressed, carrying the kind of old-world sophistication that new money could never quite purchase. "Nathaniel, my friend." Pierre's accent was thick, but his English was perfect. "I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all." Nathaniel stood, shaking hands. "Gentlemen, this is Pierre Beaumont. Pierre, please join us." Pierre settled into the chair that James had vacated, scanning the table with the amused expression of someone who'd attended 10,000 business dinners and found them all equally tedious. His eyes landed on the wine decanter. Ah, the 2009 Margot. Excellent choice. Actually, Nathaniel said, surprising himself, that's the 2005. There was some confusion with our order. The 2005? Pierre's eyebrows rose. Even better. The 2005 is exceptional. The tannins are more complex, Nathaniel finished. Yes, our waitress explained that. Your waitress knows wine? Pierre looked genuinely delighted. How refreshing. Most servers in American restaurants can barely pronounce Châteauneuf-du-Pape without murdering the language. As if summoned by the conversation, Lily appeared at Pierre's elbow with a fresh glass and a subtle nod of greeting. She began to pour his wine, her movements efficient and unobtrusive. Pierre watched her with interest, then said something in rapid French that Nathaniel didn't catch. He'd learned some French in business school, but not enough to follow a native speaker at full speed. Lily responded without pausing in her pouring, her accent flawless. Pierre's face lit up. He launched into what was clearly a longer question, something about the wine's origin and harvest conditions. Lily set down the bottle and answered, her French flowing as naturally as her English had, discussing terroir and climate patterns and viticultural techniques with the same quiet authority she'd demonstrated earlier. Nathaniel stared. So did everyone else at the table. The conversation continued for almost 2 minutes. Lily explained something about soil composition in the Margot region, referencing a documentary she'd apparently watched about traditional French winemaking. Pierre was nodding enthusiastically, completely engrossed, treating this waitress like a colleague rather than staff. Finally, Lily finished her explanation, gave a small smile, and asked in English if anyone needed anything else. My dear, Pierre said, switching back to English himself, where did you learn to speak French like that? You have a Parisian accent, very proper, very clean. Books, mostly, Lily said, and films. I've never actually been to France. Never? Pierre looked scandalized. But you speak better than half the people I know who were born there. Thank you, that's very kind. Lily's expression remained polite but distant, like she was used to receiving compliments she didn't quite believe. Can I bring anyone coffee? Dessert wine? Nothing for me, Pierre said, but please, if you have a moment later, I would love to continue our conversation. It's rare to meet someone in this country who understands French wine culture beyond what the magazines tell them to think. Lily nodded, though her eyes suggested she knew that conversation would never actually happen, then disappeared again into the background of the restaurant. Pierre turned to Nathaniel with an expression that was part amusement, part reproach. You have been hiding that treasure from me. Where did you find her? I didn't find her anywhere. She works here. Obviously. But why is she working here? A woman who speaks French like that, who understands wine like that, she should be working in international business or education or hospitality management at minimum. Maybe she likes being a waitress, Gerald suggested. Pierre gave him a withering look. No one likes being a waitress, my friend. Not at this level. Not with that mind. The comment hung in the air, uncomfortable and true. Nathaniel found himself wondering the same thing. Why was someone with Lily's obvious intelligence and education working in a job that required her to be invisible to people who wouldn't notice her if she disappeared entirely? The evening wound down. Business cards were exchanged. Promises were made. Pierre left with an invitation for Nathaniel to visit his vineyard in Bordeaux, an offer that represented months of careful relationship building finally paying off. The other executives filtered out in pairs and small groups, heading to cars and hotels and whatever came next. By 10:30, only Nathaniel and Robert remained at the table. You should go home, Robert said, checking his phone. Marcus is probably still awake. Nanny said he was asleep by 8. Nanny always says he's asleep by 8. Marcus is never actually asleep by 8. Nathaniel smiled despite himself. Robert was right. Marcus had inherited his mother's inability to shut his brain off at bedtime. He'd be up in his room right now, reading or building something or doing whatever 7-year-olds did when they were supposed to be sleeping. The thought should have made Nathaniel stand up and leave, should have sent him home to check on his son, to maybe read him another chapter of whatever book they were working through together. But instead, he signaled for the check and found himself scanning the dining room again. Lily was clearing a table near the windows. Her movements had slowed slightly, the weariness of someone who'd been on their feet for hours starting to show in the careful way she stacked plates. Nathaniel watched her carry a tray toward the kitchen, noticed the small wince when she shifted her weight. "You're staring," Robert said. "I'm not staring." "You've been staring at her for the past hour. It's actually kind of creepy." Nathaniel dragged his attention back to his CFO. "I was rude to her earlier." "Yes, you were." "I should apologize properly." Robert's expression turned skeptical. "Nathaniel, buddy, I've known you for 6 years. In that entire time, I have watched you destroy business rivals, fire underperforming executives without blinking, and negotiate deals that left grown men crying in bathroom stalls. You don't do guilt. You don't do apologies. So what's really going on here?" Nathaniel didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. Not one that made sense anyway. All he knew was that something about Lily Hart had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't quite explain. The intelligence she'd hidden behind quiet professionalism. The way she'd corrected him without making him feel small, even though he'd deserved it. That look of disappointment that suggested she'd expected better from him. When was the last time anyone had expected better from him? "I'm going to talk to her," he said finally. "Bad idea." "Noted. Seriously bad idea. You're her customer. She can't tell you to go away even if she wants to. That's a power dynamic issue." "I'm not trying to..." Nathaniel stopped. "What do you think I'm trying to do?" "I don't know. But I know you, and when you get that look in your eyes, something's about to get acquired, destroyed, or fundamentally reorganized. And this woman probably doesn't want to be any of those things." Robert was right. Of course he was right. Nathaniel should just pay the check, leave a generous tip, and go home to his son. Forget about the waitress with the perfect French accent and the eyes that saw through expensive suits to the flawed person underneath. He should. The check arrived. Nathaniel added a tip that would have made Robert wince if he'd seen it, then stood and walked toward the kitchen doors where Lily had disappeared. Robert called after him. "This is a mistake." Probably. Nathaniel pushed through the doors anyway. The kitchen was chaos, that organized chaos that happens in high-end restaurants during final cleanup. Chefs shouting in multiple languages, dishwashers running, the smell of bleach and food and steam. Lily stood at a side station, rolling silverware into napkins with mechanical precision, her fingers moving without conscious thought. She looked up when Nathaniel entered, and something flickered across her face. Wariness, maybe. Or just exhaustion. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I wanted to apologize." "You already did." "Not properly." Nathaniel moved closer, aware of the other kitchen staff watching them with interest. "What I said earlier, about the wine, that was out of line. You were doing your job, and I made an assumption about you that was both incorrect and insulting." Lily's hands never stopped rolling silverware. "It's fine. It's not fine." "Then consider your apology accepted, and we can both move on." Her tone remained polite but distant, the same voice she'd use with any customer. Professional. Detached. Safe. Nathaniel found himself frustrated by that distance, which was absurd. He didn't know this woman, had no reason to want her to drop that professional mask. But he did want it. Wanted to see whatever was behind those careful eyes. "Pierre was impressed with you," he said, changing tactics. Pierre was being polite. Pierre Beaumont is never polite. He's French. They have a cultural aversion to false flattery. That almost got a smile. Almost. "Well, it was nice talking to him. He's right, you know, about you being wasted here." Now Lily did look up, and the expression in her eyes had gone sharp. "You don't know anything about me. I know you speak at least 3 languages fluently. I know you understand wine chemistry. I know you're educated well beyond what this job requires. And I know you're a billionaire CEO who probably hasn't had to serve someone else in his entire life. We all have our stories." She finished the last piece of silverware and started loading them into a container. "Was there something else you needed, Mr. Cross?" She knew his name. Of course she knew his name. The reservation had probably been made under his company. And even if it hadn't been, Nathaniel's face was recognizable enough in Chicago business circles that most people who paid attention would know who he was. "No," he said. Then, "Why are you working here?" "Because they pay me." "That's not what I meant." "I know what you meant." Lily picked up the container of rolled silverware. "You meant, Why am I working as a waitress when I could be doing something more impressive? Something that would make better use of my expensive education and obvious talents? That's not, it's exactly what you meant. And the answer is, it's none of your business. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish closing my section. She moved past him toward the dining room, and Nathaniel did something he almost never did. He followed. Wait, Mr. Cross? Nathaniel. Mr. Cross, Lily repeated firmly. I appreciate the apology. I do. But I've been on my feet for 9 hours. I have another hour of work left, and I really can't spend my time explaining my life choices to a customer who was curious for 5 minutes. They were back in the dining room now. Most of the other diners had cleared out. Only a couple of tables remained occupied, and those were clearly finishing up. The restaurant felt different in this transitional state, less grand, more tired, like seen backstage after a performance ended. Lily started wiping down the table where Nathaniel's party had been sitting. He watched her work, this efficient routine she'd probably done thousands of times. Spray bottle, cloth, systematic coverage of the surface, checking for missed spots. I lost my wife 4 years ago, he said suddenly. Lily's hands stilled. I'm sorry. Cancer, ovarian. She was 30 when she died. That's terrible. Lily's voice had softened slightly. I really am sorry. We have a son, Marcus. He's 7 now. And for the past 4 years, I've been trying to be enough for him. Enough parent, enough stability, enough of everything he lost when his mother died. But most days, I feel like I'm failing. Lily set down the spray bottle and looked at him properly for the first time since the kitchen. Really looked, like she was trying to figure out why he was telling her this. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you asked why I judged you, why I made assumptions. And the truth is, I don't know. Maybe because it's easier to think other people's problems are simple, that they made bad choices or didn't try hard enough. Because if your problems are complex and structural and not really your fault, then maybe mine are too. And I can't afford to think that way. Silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the kitchen, someone dropped a pan with a loud crash. Neither of them flinched. My father was an English professor, Lily said finally. My mother taught French literature. They met at a university in Boston, got married, had me. Very academic, very proper, very concerned with intellectual achievement. She picked up the spray bottle again but didn't use it, just held it. They died in a car accident when I was 24, drunk driver. Both gone instantly. And they left behind a daughter with 2 master's degrees, fluency in 4 languages, and absolutely no practical job experience because they'd always assumed I'd go into academia like them. Nathaniel said nothing, just listened. Turns out, Lily continued, master's degrees in literature and linguistics aren't particularly marketable in the real world. Especially when you're grieving too hard to interview properly and you've got student loans from private universities that your parents promised they'd help with. So you take the job you can get, and then you keep taking that job because it pays better than adjunct teaching and doesn't require you to publish research you don't have time to conduct. She met his eyes. I'm not wasted here, Mr. Cross. I'm surviving here. There's a difference. The words hit harder than they should have. Nathaniel found himself thinking about Marcus, about what would happen to his son if something happened to Nathaniel. Would Marcus end up in some version of Lily's situation, educated but unprepared, grieving but needing to pay bills? I shouldn't have said that, he said quietly. About you being wasted. That was presumptuous. Yes, it was. And I shouldn't have followed you into the kitchen. Also true. And I'm probably making you uncomfortable right now by continuing to talk to you when you're trying to work. For the first time all evening, Lily smiled. It was small, barely there, but real. Extremely uncomfortable. I'll go. Thank you. But Nathaniel didn't move. Neither did Lily. They stood there in the empty dining room, 2 people who'd started the evening as Billionaire and Waitress and had somehow ended up as something slightly more complicated than that. Can I ask you something? Nathaniel said. You're going to regardless of what I say. Fair point. Do you ever take breaks, like actual breaks where you're not working? Occasionally. There's a bookstore about 3 blocks from here, open until midnight. Small place, mostly used books. Terrible coffee. I know it, Lily said. I go there sometimes after shifts. Would you Nathaniel hesitated, suddenly feeling like he was 17 again, asking someone to prom. Would you want to go there now? After you finish closing. Just to talk. Nothing weird. I promise. Lily studied him for a long moment. Why? Because you're interesting. Because talking to you is the first conversation I've had in months that didn't feel like a performance. Because I've spent 4 years turning into someone I don't particularly like, and 5 minutes talking to you made me remember what it felt like to be uncertain about something. That's the worst sales pitch I've ever heard. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Everyone's trying to sell something, Mr. Cross. Nathaniel, he corrected again. And you're right. But what I'm trying to sell is just an hour of your time. In a public place. Where you can leave whenever you want. And all I'm offering in return is conversation with someone who will absolutely say the wrong thing multiple times because I've apparently forgotten how to talk to people like a normal human being. Lily almost laughed. He could see it in her eyes, that flicker of genuine amusement fighting against every instinct that told her this was a bad idea. This is a bad idea, she said out loud. Probably. You're a customer. I won't be after tonight. You're a billionaire. Can't really change that. I'm exhausted. So am I. Lily sighed, and Nathaniel knew he'd won before she even spoke. 1 hour, the bookstore. And if you turn out to be a serial killer, I'm going to be very disappointed in my judgment. Fair enough. I need 30 minutes to finish closing. I'll wait outside. Nathaniel left before she could change her mind, pushing through the restaurant's front doors into the cool Chicago night. Robert was long gone. The street was mostly empty except for the occasional taxi and the kind of people who were either starting their nights or ending them. He pulled out his phone and texted the nanny. Running late. Everything okay? The response came back immediately. Marcus is asleep. Actually asleep this time. Take your time. Nathaniel pocketed his phone and leaned against the building's exterior wall, watching traffic pass and wondering what the hell he was doing. Robert was right. This was a mistake. Lily Hart was a stranger who owed him nothing and clearly had every reason to distrust the motives of wealthy men who suddenly took interest in her. But she'd said yes anyway. That had to mean something. 28 minutes later, the restaurant doors opened and Lily emerged in civilian clothes, jeans, a sweater, a jacket that had seen better days. Her hair was down now, falling past her shoulders in dark waves that made her look younger and somehow more vulnerable than she had in uniform. She spotted him and stopped. You actually waited. I said I would. People say lots of things. They started walking toward the bookstore, maintaining a careful distance between them. The streets were quieter now, that strange lull between dinner crowds and late-night bar traffic. Their footsteps echoed against concrete and glass. Can I ask you something? Lily said after half a block of silence. Seems fair. Why did you really mock me earlier, at the table? What was that about? Nathaniel considered lying. Considered deflecting. Considered any response other than the truth. But something about the way Lily asked, direct, genuinely curious, not accusatory, made him want to be honest. Because you reminded me of my wife, he said. The way you moved, quiet, trying not to take up space. She used to do that at business events before she got sick, like she thought she didn't belong there. And that annoyed you? It reminded me that I couldn't fix it. Couldn't make her feel like she belonged no matter how much money I made or how successful I became. Some things can't be fixed with power. He paused. And yes, taking that frustration out on you was shitty and unfair, and I'm sorry. Lily didn't respond immediately. They walked another half block in silence before she said, Your wife sounds like she was smarter than both of us. How do you figure? She understood something that we're both still learning, that not belonging isn't always a problem to be solved. Sometimes it's just information, a signal that maybe you're in the wrong room. The bookstore appeared ahead of them, its windows glowing warm yellow against the dark street. Nathaniel could see shelves crammed with books, the kind of beautiful chaos that only happened in stores run by people who loved literature more than profit. They pushed through the door, and a small bell chimed their arrival. The bookstore smelled like paper and dust, and the particular mustiness that accumulated in places where knowledge sat too long without being disturbed. An elderly man behind the counter looked up from his crossword puzzle, nodded at them without particular interest, and returned to whatever clue he'd been working on. Classical music played from speakers that probably hadn't been updated since the 80s, the sound tinny but somehow comforting. Lily moved toward the fiction section without hesitation, her fingers trailing along spines like she was greeting old friends. Nathaniel followed, watching how her entire posture changed in here. The careful invisibility she'd maintained at the restaurant had disappeared. In its place was something looser, more natural, like she'd finally walked into a room where she actually belonged. "You come here a lot," he said. "Not a question. 3-4 times a week, whenever I can't sleep." Lily pulled out a worn paperback, examined it, slid it back into place. "The owner, Harold, the guy at the counter, he lets me stay past closing sometimes. I help him reorganize sections in exchange for borrowing whatever I want." "That's a good deal. Better than therapy." She glanced at him. "Cheaper, anyway." They drifted deeper into the store, past shelves organized by some system that probably made sense to Harold, but appeared completely random to outside observers. Russian literature next to contemporary romance, philosophy wedged between cookbooks and true crime. It was chaos, but intentional chaos. The kind that happened when someone cared more about books than categories. Nathaniel realized he hadn't been in a bookstore in years, maybe not since college. Everything he read now came through his tablet: business journals, industry reports, the occasional thriller on the plane between meetings. When had he stopped browsing? When had reading become just another task to optimize? "What are you thinking about?" Lily asked. "That I can't remember the last time I read something just because I wanted to." "That's depressing." "Most of my life is depressing when I stop moving long enough to look at it." Lily pulled another book from the shelf, something with a cracked spine and yellowed pages. "This was my mother's favorite. She taught a whole semester course on it, made her students read it 3 times, once in English and twice in the original French." She handed it to Nathaniel. He looked at the cover, The Stranger by Albert Camus. "I've heard of it," he said. "Never read it." "You should. It's about a man who can't feel things the way he's supposed to, can't perform grief properly, can't pretend to care about social expectations." She took the book back, her fingers tracing the title. "My mother used to say Camus understood that authenticity was the most radical thing a person could attempt in a world built on performance." Sounds like she was a good teacher. She was brilliant. Both my parents were. They could talk about literature for hours without ever saying anything practical or useful or remotely applicable to real life. It drove me crazy when I was younger. Lily's voice had gone soft. I'd give anything to hear them argue about Proust one more time. Nathaniel thought about Marcus, about all the conversations they weren't having because Nathaniel was always at the office or on a call or mentally somewhere else, even when he was physically present. Would his son look back someday and wish for more arguments about nothing? More useless conversations that meant everything? They kept walking. The store was larger than it looked from outside, rooms connecting to other rooms in ways that defied normal architectural logic. Lily seemed to know every corner, every hidden section. She pulled books seemingly at random, read passages aloud, offered commentary that was half literary analysis and half personal memory. Nathaniel mostly listened. It had been so long since he'd just listened to someone talk about something they actually cared about, not because it would make them money or advance their career, but because the subject itself mattered to them. Lily talked about books the way other people talked about family members, with familiarity and frustration and deep, complicated love. "You're doing it again," she said suddenly. "Doing what?" "Staring. You did it at the restaurant too. It's unsettling." "Sorry, I'm just..." Nathaniel paused, trying to find words that didn't sound either creepy or pathetic. "I'm trying to figure out how you ended up here. We've been over this. My parents died. I needed money. This job paid. No, I mean here, in this moment, agreeing to spend your night off with a stranger who insulted you a few hours ago." Lily set down the book she'd been holding and turned to face him fully. "You really want to know?" "Yes." "Because you apologized. Not the first time. That was reflex, habit. What rich people do when they realize they've been caught being rude to the staff. But the second time. In the kitchen. That felt real." She crossed her arms, studying him. "And because you looked sad when you talked about your son. I'm a sucker for sad dads trying to figure their shit out." Nathaniel laughed despite himself. "That's what you got from my speech?" "That's what everyone got from your speech. You wear your guilt like a neon sign." Comforting. Wasn't meant to be comforting. Was meant to be true. Lily moved past him toward another section. My turn to ask questions. Fair enough. Why did you really stay tonight, after your colleagues left? You could have gone home to your kid. Should have, probably. But you waited outside that restaurant for half an hour in the cold instead. Why? Nathaniel considered several diplomatic answers before settling on honesty. Because I wanted to know if you were real. Real? At that table you were performing. Professional, controlled, playing the role of competent waitress who doesn't let the bastards get to her. But I kept wondering who you were when you weren't performing. If that person even existed anymore, or if you'd been doing this so long that the performance became the reality. Lily's expression shifted into something harder to read. And now I know. You're real. You're here, in this bookstore that smells like mold, talking about dead French existentialists like their personal friends. You're tired and probably underpaid and dealing with grief that never fully goes away. You're surviving, like you said. And that's... He trailed off. That's what? Lily prompted. More than I've managed in 4 years. The classical music had shifted to something melancholic. Strings and piano, the kind of piece that sounded like it was written for rainy afternoons and introspection. Harold was still at his counter, still working his crossword, completely ignoring the two people having an unexpectedly honest conversation in his back room. Lily pulled out her phone, checked the time, and sighed. It's almost midnight. You need to go? I should. I have a shift tomorrow at 11. On a Saturday? Restaurants are busiest on weekends. You'd know that if you'd ever worked in one. They started moving back toward the entrance, their path slower now, like neither of them was particularly eager to return to the cold street and whatever happened next. Nathaniel tried to think of something to say that would extend this, that would give him a reason to keep talking to this woman who'd somehow become the most interesting part of his entire week. But Lily spoke first. Can I tell you something? She said. Of course. When you walked into that kitchen earlier, my first thought was, here we go again. Another rich guy who thinks buying an expensive dinner means he's earned the right to my time and attention. Another man who's going to ask for my number, or offer me a better opportunity, or suggest I'm too smart to be doing this job, as if any of those things are his business. And now? Now I think you're just lonely. And you mistook me for someone who might understand that. She stopped walking, turned to face him near the store's entrance. The problem is, I do understand it, which is why this, she gestured between them, is a bad idea. Why? Because you're looking for something I can't give you, a fix, a distraction, someone to make you feel less guilty about not being enough for your son, and I'm too tired to be anyone's redemption arc. The word should have stung. Maybe would have, if Lily had said them with cruelty. But her voice remained gentle, almost apologetic, like she was delivering news she wished she didn't have to share. You're right, Nathaniel said quietly. About most of that. I am lonely. I am looking for a distraction. But I don't think you're a fix for anything. I think you're a person I'd like to know better. And maybe that's the same thing in the end. I don't know. I'm not good at this anymore. Good at what? Being human, connecting with people who don't want something from me. Remembering what it feels like to be uncertain about whether someone will want to see me again. Lily bit her lip, and for the first time since they'd entered the bookstore, she looked genuinely conflicted. What do you want from me, Nathaniel? It was the first time she'd used his first name. He noticed. Honestly, I have no idea. I just know that talking to you feels different than talking to anyone else in my life. Better. More real. And I'd like to do it again sometime if you're willing. As friends? As whatever you're comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with any of this. Me neither. They stood there in the bookstore's entrance, the bell above the door chiming softly whenever the wind caught it just right. Harold had finally looked up from his crossword, watching them with the patient expression of someone who'd witnessed countless awkward conversations in this exact spot. I work breakfast shift on Sunday, Lily said finally. 7 to 3. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from the restaurant. Terrible coffee like you promised, but they have good pie. If you wanted to continue this conversation, I'd be there around 3:30. Just the conversation? Just the conversation. No expectations? Absolutely zero expectations, which means you're free to not show up and I'm free to change my mind, and we can both pretend this was a nice random encounter between strangers who will never see each other again. Nathaniel pulled out his phone. What's the coffee shop called? Millie's, on Franklin Street. You can't miss it. There's a giant neon pie in the window that's been broken since the 90s. Only lights up the word die now. Charming. Chicago aesthetic. Lily pushed open the door, letting in a blast of cold air. Good night, Nathaniel. Good night, Lily. She disappeared into the darkness, her figure quickly swallowed by shadows and distance. Nathaniel stood in the doorway for another moment, watching the space where she'd been, before Harold's voice interrupted his thoughts. You gonna buy anything, or did you just come here to bother my regulars? Nathaniel turned. The old man was staring at him with frank curiosity. Sorry, I'll just... The Camus book she showed you. You should buy it. I'm not really a... Wasn't a suggestion. Harold stood, his joints creaking audibly, and shuffled toward the shelf where Lily had pulled The Stranger. He retrieved a copy. Not the same worn one she'd held, but a slightly newer printing with a different cover. Girl comes in here 3-4 nights a week. Never buys anything because she can't afford to. Just reads whatever she can in the time she has and puts it back exactly where she found it. He pressed the book into Nathaniel's hands. She told you about her parents? Harold asked. A little. They used to come here too, before the accident. Nice people. Smart. Her father would spend hours in the poetry section, reading stuff out loud when he thought no one was listening. Her mother loved the French literature, obviously. They'd bring Lily when she was younger, let her run around while they argued about whatever intellectuals argue about. Harold returned to his counter, picked up his crossword. After they died, Lily kept coming. Sometimes she'd just sit in the corner and cry for an hour. Sometimes she'd read, sometimes she'd help me organize, because she needed something to do with her hands. Been watching her try to survive their absence for 6 years now. He looked up, his roomy eyes suddenly sharp. So if you're here to make her life more complicated, I'd prefer you didn't come back. I'm not trying to fix it. Everyone's trying to something, son. Question is whether you know what that something is before you go breaking things you can't fix. Nathaniel paid for the book, left a tip that made Harold grunt in surprise, and walked out into the Chicago night. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees. His breath came out in visible clouds. Somewhere nearby, sirens wailed, police or ambulance, impossible to tell which. He pulled out his phone and called his driver, then stood on the empty sidewalk while waiting for the car to arrive. The Camus book felt heavier than it should in his hand. He opened it to a random page and read by the glow of a streetlight. Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I can't be sure. Christ, cheerful stuff. The car pulled up and Nathaniel slid into the back seat, grateful for the warmth. His driver, James, different from the CFO James, glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Home, Mr. Cross? Yeah, home. They drove through empty streets, past buildings that looked different at night. Less imposing, more vulnerable. Chicago had that quality. During the day, it was all steel and ambition, but at night, it revealed its softer underbelly. The spaces between the skyscrapers where real life actually happened. Nathaniel's phone buzzed, a text from Robert. How'd it go? He considered not responding, but Robert would just keep asking. Interesting. Having coffee with her Sunday. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you're an idiot? Probably. Definitely. Does she know you're an idiot? She has a working theory. The penthouse was dark when Nathaniel arrived, except for the small lamp the nanny always left on in the entryway. He paid James, took the private elevator up, and let himself in as quietly as possible. The space was enormous, 4,000 square feet overlooking the lake, with floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most people's houses. His interior designer had called it a masterpiece of modern luxury. Nathaniel mostly thought it felt empty. He checked on Marcus first, the way he always did. His son's room was the only space in the apartment that felt lived in, crowded with books and building sets, and the kind of creative chaos that happened when a 7-year-old was left to his own devices. Marcus was actually asleep this time, curled on his side with one arm thrown over a stuffed elephant that had belonged to his mother. Nathaniel stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching his son breathe. Marcus looked so much like Sarah. Same dark hair, same serious expression even in sleep, Same small nose that wrinkled when he dreamed. 4 years gone, and Nathaniel still expected to see her when he looked at their son. Still felt the absence like a missing limb. He pulled the door closed and headed to his own room, changed into sweatpants and an old t-shirt, and stood at the windows looking out over Lake Michigan. The water was invisible in the darkness, but he could sense it out there. Vast and cold and indifferent to everything happening on shore. His phone buzzed again. This time, an email from his executive assistant with tomorrow's schedule. Breakfast meeting at 7, conference calls at 9 and 11, lunch with potential investors, more calls, a site visit to their new research facility, dinner with the board chairman. 17 hours accounted for, every minute optimized, no space for anything that didn't directly contribute to the continued growth and success of cross-healthcare technologies. When had this become his life? He thought about what Lily had said, about authenticity being radical, about performance becoming reality if you did it long enough. Nathaniel had been performing successful CEO for so long that he'd forgotten what existed underneath. Or maybe nothing existed underneath anymore. Maybe he'd optimized himself right out of personhood. The Camus book sat on his nightstand. He picked it up, settled into bed, and started reading. 2 hours later, he was still reading, completely absorbed in Meursault's strange detachment from his own life. The prose was clean and simple and somehow devastating. Every sentence felt like it was describing Nathaniel's own existence, going through motions, performing appropriate emotions, never quite connecting with the reality of what was happening around him. His phone buzzed at 3 in the morning, Marcus's name on the screen. Nathaniel was in his son's room in seconds, heart pounding with the particular terror that lived in every parent who'd already lost one person they loved. But Marcus was fine. Awake, but fine. Sitting up in bed with tears on his face and that expression that meant he'd had another nightmare. "Hey, buddy." Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed. "Bad dream?" Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. He'd inherited his mother's inability to verbalize fear, instead bottling it up until it exploded at 3 in the morning. "You want to talk about it?" Another nod. Then, quietly, "I forgot what Mom looked like." The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. "What?" "In my dream, I was trying to remember her face, but I couldn't. It was all blurry, like static on TV. Marcus's voice cracked. "Am I forgetting her?" Nathaniel pulled his son into his arms, feeling the small body shake with tears that came from somewhere deeper than ordinary childhood fear. This was grief, raw and real and impossible to fix with money or power or any of the tools Nathaniel had spent his life accumulating. "You're not forgetting her," he said, even though he knew that wasn't entirely true. Memory faded, details blurred. That was just how time worked, cruel and relentless and unstoppable. And even if some of the details get fuzzy, the important stuff stays. The way she made you feel, the stories she told, the things she taught you. Like what? Nathaniel thought about Sarah, about who she'd been before the cancer started eating her from the inside. Like how to be kind even when people don't deserve it. Like how to find joy in small things. Like how to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Marcus pulled back, his wet face serious. "Do you do that stuff?" "What stuff?" "The things Mom taught. Are you kind to people who don't deserve it? Do you find joy in small things?" Christ. When had his 7-year-old become this perceptive? "I try," Nathaniel said, which was a lie. "Every day I try." "But do you actually do it?" Nathaniel looked at his son and saw Sarah looking back, that same quiet insistence on honesty, that same refusal to accept comfortable falsehoods. She would have been so proud of the person Marcus was becoming, and so disappointed in who Nathaniel had become. "No," he said finally. "I don't think I do." "Why not?" "Because it's easier not to. Because being kind takes energy I don't have. Because small joys feel insignificant compared to big problems. Because I've spent 4 years just trying to keep us both afloat. And somewhere in that process, I forgot how to actually live." Marcus processed this with the seriousness of someone much older. "That sounds lonely." "It is. You should fix it." "Working on it, buddy." They sat together in the dark for a while, Nathaniel's arm around his son's shoulders. Outside, the city continued its endless cycle. People going to work or coming home from bars, taxis ferrying strangers to unknown destinations, the whole massive machinery of urban life grinding forward regardless of individual suffering or joy. "Dad?" Marcus said eventually. "Yeah? Can I tell you something weird?" "Always." "Sometimes I'm glad Mom isn't here to see what we became." The honesty of it was devastating. Nathaniel tightened his grip on his son. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she'd be sad if she saw how much we miss her. And she'd be disappointed that you work all the time and I spend all my time with the nanny. She'd want us to be happy, and we're not. And she'd feel like it was her fault even though it isn't." Marcus leaned into his father's side. "So maybe it's better this way. At least she doesn't have to know she couldn't fix us." Nathaniel didn't have words for that. Didn't have wisdom or comfort or anything remotely adequate. So he just held his son and let the truth of it settle into his bones. They were both broken in ways Sarah could never have anticipated, performing happiness badly and fooling no one. "We're going to fix this," he said finally. "How?" "I don't know yet, but we're going to try." "Promise?" "Promise." Marcus eventually fell back asleep, but Nathaniel stayed in the small bed, his back against the wall, watching his son breathe in the darkness. At some point, the nanny, Teresa, whose actual job was round-the-clock childcare for a kid who barely saw his father, appeared in the doorway. She took one look at the scene and disappeared without comment. Dawn came slowly. Nathaniel watched the sky lighten through Marcus's window, watched the city wake up and begin its Saturday routine. Somewhere out there, Lily was probably sleeping in the small apartment she'd mentioned once during their conversation. Or maybe she was already awake, preparing for another shift, serving people who wouldn't really see her. He thought about Harold's warning, about breaking things he couldn't fix, about whether he had any right to pursue this connection with someone who was clearly doing her best just to survive daily life. But he thought about Sunday too, about coffee at Millie's with its broken neon sign that only spelled die, about continuing the conversation they'd started in a bookstore at midnight, about the possibility of knowing someone who didn't need him to be successful or powerful or anything other than honest. Around 7, Marcus woke up again. This time there were no tears, just the groggy confusion of a kid who'd had a rough night and wasn't entirely sure why he was waking up in his father's arms. "Morning," Nathaniel said. "Did you sleep here?" "Yeah." "Why?" "Because you needed me to." Marcus considered this. "Can we have pancakes?" "We can absolutely have pancakes." They went to the kitchen together and Nathaniel attempted to cook breakfast for the first time in months. The pancakes came out unevenly cooked and vaguely misshapen, but Marcus didn't complain. They sat at the enormous kitchen island, eating mediocre food in a space designed for entertaining dozens, and for a few minutes it felt almost normal. "I have meetings today," Nathaniel said eventually. "But what if I canceled them?" Marcus looked up, syrup on his chin. "You never cancel meetings." "I know. But what if I did? What if we spent the day together? Just us. No nanny, no work, no phone calls." "Doing what?" "Good question. What did fathers and sons do together on Saturdays?" Nathaniel had no idea. His own father had died when Nathaniel was in college, and their relationship had mostly consisted of awkward dinners and arguments about Nathaniel's choice to pursue business instead of pharmacy. "Whatever you want," he said. "Can we go to the Field Museum? There's an exhibit on ancient Egypt I want to see." "Done." "Really?" "Really." Marcus's smile was worth every meeting Nathaniel would have to reschedule, every annoyed email he'd receive from colleagues who expected him to always be available. They finished breakfast, got dressed, and spent the day wandering through museum exhibits like normal people instead of high-powered CEOs and their neglected children. Nathaniel watched Marcus absorb information about mummies and hieroglyphics with the kind of focused intensity Sarah used to bring to everything she cared about. He watched his son ask questions of the museum guides with genuine curiosity rather than the performance of intelligence. He watched Marcus just be a kid and realized how rarely he actually saw that anymore. Around 4 in the afternoon, exhausted and happy, they grabbed hot dogs from a street vendor and sat on a bench overlooking the lake. "This was a good day," Marcus said through a mouthful of relish and onions. "Yeah, it was. Can we do it again sometime?" "Every Saturday, if you want." You'd cancel meetings every Saturday? Nathaniel thought about his schedule, about all the obligations and expectations and carefully constructed systems that kept his empire running smoothly, about what it would mean to actually prioritize his son over his business, consistently, without exception. Yes, he said, I would. Marcus leaned against his side, and they watched boats move across the water until the temperature dropped enough that they had to leave. The drive home was quiet, but comfortable. Marcus fell asleep in the car, and Nathaniel carried him up to the apartment, tucked him into bed, still wearing his clothes from the museum. Teresa appeared again, her expression unreadable. Different day, she observed. Working on it. Good, the kid needs you more than your company does. She left before Nathaniel could respond, but her words echoed in the empty apartment. The kid needs you more than your company does. Simple truth, impossible to argue with. And yet Nathaniel had spent 4 years doing exactly the opposite, prioritizing work over family, performance over presence, success over connection. He went to bed early, exhausted from a day of actual parenting. The Camus book was still on his nightstand. He picked it up and read another chapter, finding himself drawn into Meursault's strange journey toward authentic feeling, even if that authenticity led him to places society couldn't accept. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. Nathaniel spent the morning with Marcus. More pancakes, less successful this time, before the nanny took over so he could prepare for his coffee meeting with Lily. He changed clothes 3 times, which was ridiculous. They were getting coffee, not attending a state dinner. By 3:15, he was parked outside Millie's, watching the broken neon sign flicker weakly in the afternoon gloom. The place looked exactly like Lily had described. Worn, slightly depressing, the kind of establishment that survived on location and inertia rather than quality or ambiance. He went inside anyway. The interior matched the exterior, cracked vinyl booths, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely ill. A display case of pies that had probably been sitting there since morning. The coffee smelled burnt, and the floor hadn't been properly cleaned in what looked like years. It was perfect. Nathaniel chose a booth near the window and waited. Ordering coffee, he had no intention of drinking from a waitress who looked like she'd given up on life sometime during the Bush administration. 3:30 came and went. Then 3:45. Nathaniel pulled out his phone, considered texting, decided against it. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe Sunday morning clarity had convinced her that spending time with a customer who'd humiliated her was a terrible idea. He couldn't blame her if that was the case. At 3:52, the door opened and Lily walked in, still wearing what looked like her work clothes, her hair damp from either rain or a quick shower. She spotted him immediately, and something in her expression softened. "You came," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "So did you." "I wasn't sure I would." "What changed your mind?" Lily signaled the waitress for coffee, waited until it arrived before answering. "Curiosity. And the fact that I spent my entire shift this morning thinking about our conversation instead of remembering table orders. You're becoming a distraction." "Sorry?" "Don't be sorry. Just be interesting enough to justify the distraction." Nathaniel smiled despite the terrible coffee and the fluorescent lighting that made Lily's exhaustion more visible than it probably was. "No pressure there. You're a billionaire. I assume you're used to pressure." She took a sip of her own coffee, grimaced, but kept drinking anyway. "So, tell me about your Saturday. Did you spend it conquering new markets or whatever it is people like you do on weekends?" "I took my son to the Field Museum." Lily's eyebrows rose. "Really? Why do you sound so surprised?" "Because Friday night you were mocking waitresses at a 5-star restaurant. Saturday you're looking at dinosaur bones with a 7-year-old. It's a bit of whiplash." "The exhibits were mostly Egyptian, actually. Marcus is going through a mummy phase." "That's adorable." "He asked me if I was kind to people who don't deserve it." Nathaniel rotated his coffee cup, watching the burnt liquid slosh against the sides. "Apparently my dead wife taught him that kindness mattered, and he wanted to know if I was honoring her lessons." The lightness dropped from Lily's expression. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I wasn't. That I'd spent 4 years being the opposite of kind because it was easier." "And how did he take that?" "Better than I did. He just said I should fix it." Nathaniel looked up. "So I canceled all my Saturday meetings and spent the day with him instead. First time I've done that since Sarah died." Lily studied him across the cracked Formica table. "You're trying to tell me something." I'm trying to tell you that you were right. About performance becoming reality. About authenticity being radical. I've been performing successful single father for so long that I forgot what actually being present for my kid looked like. And you think one museum trip fixes that? No, but it's a start. The waitress returned to refill their cups without asking if they wanted more. Lily thanked her by name, Carol, apparently, and asked about her daughter who was starting community college in the fall. Carol's face lit up, and they spent 5 minutes discussing scholarship applications and financial aid before the waitress moved on to other tables. You know everyone, Nathaniel observed. I know people who work for a living. There's a difference. Lily added more sugar to her terrible coffee. Carol's worked here for 16 years. Her husband left when their daughter was 2. She's been doing double shifts for months to save up tuition money. You learned all that from serving her coffee? I learned it from listening. Most people will tell you their entire life story if you just pay attention long enough. She paused. You should try it sometime. Listening? Seeing people. Actually seeing them, not just categorizing them by their usefulness to whatever you're trying to accomplish. The observation stung because it was accurate. Nathaniel had spent years reducing people to their strategic value, potential allies, competitors, employees, obstacles. When had he stopped seeing them as humans with their own complicated lives that had nothing to do with him? You're right, he said. I know. You're not going to let me off easy on anything, are you? Why would I? Lily leaned back against the vinyl booth. You don't need easy. You need honest. Everyone else in your life probably tells you what you want to hear because you pay them or intimidate them or both. I don't need your money, and I'm not intimidated by you, so you get the truth instead. And what's the truth right now? That you're sitting in a terrible diner on a Sunday afternoon with a waitress you barely know, trying to figure out if I'm going to make you feel better about yourself or worse. And the answer is probably both, which is confusing for someone who's used to clear outcomes and measurable results. Nathaniel laughed. You've thought about this. I've thought about nothing else since Friday. You're like a puzzle I can't solve. Rich guy, lonely guy, guilty guy, trying guy. I can't figure out which one is real. All of them, none of them. I don't know anymore. Outside, rain had started falling in that half-hearted Chicago way. Not quite committed to a real storm, but too persistent to ignore. People hurried past the window with newspapers over their heads, dodging puddles and cursing the weather. The diner's interior felt separate from all of it, a bubble of fluorescent warmth and bad coffee that existed outside normal time. Can I ask you something personal? Nathaniel said. You're going to anyway. What do you do when you're not working? When you're not at the restaurant or the bookstore, what does your life look like? Lily's expression shifted into something harder to read. Why do you want to know? Because I've told you about my son and my dead wife and my existential crisis. Seems fair that I learned something real about you too. She considered this, fingers drumming against her coffee cup. Fine. I live in a studio apartment in Pilsen. 400 square feet, heat that barely works in winter, neighbors who fight loud enough that I know every detail of their relationship problems. I wake up at 6 most mornings, go for a run because it's cheaper than therapy, come back and study whatever language I'm working on. Right now it's Mandarin. How many languages do you speak? Fluently? 5. Conversationally? Another 3 or 4. Depends on your definition of conversational. That's incredible. It's survival. Languages are the one skill I have that might actually get me out of restaurants someday. Maybe into translation work or teaching or something that doesn't require me to smile while people treat me like furniture. She took another sip of coffee. After studying, I go to work, 8 to 12 hours depending on the shift. Come home, eat whatever I can make for under $5, study more, read if I have energy, sleep, repeat. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also mine. I built it from nothing after my parents died, and nobody can take it away from me. Do you have friends? People you spend time with? Some. Other servers, mostly. We go out after shifts sometimes, drink too much, complain about customers. There's a girl from my building, Anna, who's teaching me Portuguese in exchange for help with her English homework. And Harold from the bookstore, but I don't know if he counts as a friend or just a person who tolerates my presence. He cares about you. Maybe, in that gruff old man way where he'd never actually say it. Lily smiled slightly. He warned you off me, didn't he, after I left? How did you know? Because he does that with everyone who shows interest. He's very protective of his regulars. Last year, some guy tried to ask me out while I was browsing the poetry section, and Harold literally banned him from the store. Was the guy bothering you? Not particularly. I think Harold just didn't like his face. She laughed. The hazards of having a surrogate grandfather who runs a bookstore. They ordered pie. Carol's recommendation, some kind of apple situation that was either very fresh or very old, hard to tell which. It arrived with 2 forks and the kind of presentation that suggested Carol had given up on plating standards sometime during the Reagan administration. But it tasted better than expected, sweet and tart, and almost worth the $3.50 they charged. Marcus asked me something else, Nathaniel said between bites. He said sometimes he's glad his mother isn't here to see what we became, because we'd disappoint her, and she'd blame herself even though it wasn't her fault. Lily set down her fork. That's heavy for a 7-year-old. He's been through more than most adults. Grief aged him. Grief ages everyone, just usually not that young. She paused. Do you think he's right? Would your wife be disappointed? Nathaniel thought about Sarah, about who she'd been before the illness. Fierce and kind and completely unwilling to accept bullshit from anyone, including her husband. She'd called him out when he got too focused on work, when he started treating their marriage like another item on his task list. She'd reminded him that success meant nothing if he couldn't be present for the people he loved. Yes, he said quietly. She'd be furious with who I became, with how I let work consume everything, with how I let our son grow up with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent. But she'd also understand why. Would she? Grief makes people do strange things, turn into versions of themselves they don't recognize. Your wife was sick. She knew what that did to families. She'd be sad about what happened to you, but I doubt she'd be surprised. Lily met his eyes. The question is whether you're going to stay that person or become someone else. I'm trying to become someone else. Trying isn't the same as doing. I know, but it's all I have right now. Rain drummed harder against the window. A family came in from the weather. Mother, father, 2 kids who immediately started fighting over which booth they'd sit in. Carol dealt with them with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd refereed 10,000 family disputes and expected 10,000 more. Tell me about your wife, Lily said. Not the sick version, the before version. Nathaniel hadn't talked about Sarah, really talked about her, in years. Most people treated her like a tragedy to be acknowledged briefly before moving on to safer topics. But Lily was watching him with genuine interest, waiting for whatever he wanted to share. She was a teacher, he started, high school English. She loved it despite the terrible pay and the constant battles with administration over curriculum. Used to say that teenagers were the only people honest enough to tell you when your lesson plan was boring. Sounds like my kind of person. She would have liked you. You both had that same quality, refusing to perform enthusiasm you didn't feel. Nathaniel smiled at the memory. We met at a fundraiser for her school. I donated money because my assistant told me it was good PR. Sarah cornered me by the punch bowl and spent 20 minutes explaining everything wrong with how wealthy people approached education charity. She sounds delightful. She was terrifying. I'd never met anyone who cared that much about getting it right. Most people at those events just wanted to network or be seen. Sarah actually wanted to fix things. And you fell in love with her. Immediately, completely, in a way that scared the hell out of me because I'd spent my whole life being careful about who I let matter. He pushed pie around his plate. We got married too fast, had Marcus too young, built a life that felt perfect until it wasn't. When did she get sick? Marcus was 3. She'd been feeling tired for months, but we both assumed it was just the job and parenting. By the time we caught it, the cancer had already spread. Stage 3, borderline stage 4. The words still hurt to say out loud. She fought for a year. Chemo, surgery, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. Lily reached across the table and took his hand. The gesture was simple, unthinking, the kind of comfort one person offered another when words weren't enough. Her fingers were cold from the rain, but her grip was steady. I'm sorry, she said. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything. No, but it means you're not carrying it alone. They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped across terrible pie and worse coffee, while rain fell and strangers lived their lives around them. Nathaniel couldn't remember the last time someone had touched him with simple compassion rather than professional courtesy or obligatory affection. It felt foreign and familiar at the same time. Lily withdrew her hand first. Can I tell you something terrible? Please. Part of me is relieved my parents died together, that neither of them had to survive the other one. She looked down at her plate. My father would have fallen apart without my mother, and my mother would have turned herself inside out trying to be strong enough for both of them. At least this way, they didn't have to figure out how to keep living when half of them was gone. That's not terrible. That's honest. Honesty can be terrible. Usually is. The family with the fighting kids had settled into their booth. The children had stopped arguing and were now deeply invested in coloring on their menus with crayons Carol had produced from somewhere. Their parents looked exhausted but relieved, that particular expression parents got when their children were occupied and quiet at the same time. Do you want more kids? Lily asked suddenly. The question caught Nathaniel off guard. I haven't thought about it. That's a lie. You've definitely thought about it. She was right. He had thought about it late at night when he couldn't sleep, wondering if Marcus would grow up lonely without siblings, wondering if Sarah would have wanted more children if she'd lived, wondering if he had enough left to give to the one child he already had, let alone hypothetical others. I don't know, he said finally. Most days I feel like I'm barely managing to be a decent father to the kid I have. Adding more seems irresponsible. But you want them. I want a lot of things I can't have. Doesn't mean I should chase them. Why not? Because wanting things leads to disappointment. Better to focus on what's actually achievable. Lily gave him a look that suggested she thought this was possibly the saddest thing she'd ever heard. That's bleak. That's practical. No, practical is preparing for disappointment while still hoping for better. What you're describing is just giving up preemptively. And what do you hope for, Lily? What impossible things do you want that you're still chasing? She didn't answer immediately. Outside, the rain had settled into a steady rhythm, the kind that would last for hours. Carol was making her rounds with the coffee pot, refilling cups and chatting with regulars who probably came here every Sunday at exactly this time. I want to publish a book, Lily said finally. Translation work, probably. Something that bridges languages and makes literature accessible to people who wouldn't otherwise experience it. I want to wake up someday and not immediately calculate how many hours I need to work to make rent. I want to travel to all the places I've only read about. Paris, Tokyo, Buenos Aires. Those aren't impossible. They feel impossible when you're living paycheck to paycheck. What if they weren't? What if money wasn't an obstacle? Lily's expression turned cautious. What are you asking? Nothing. Just hypothetically, if you could do anything, what would you do? I'd quit the restaurant tomorrow, spend a year just traveling and studying and figuring out what I actually want to do with my life instead of what I have to do to survive. She paused. But money is an obstacle, so the question is pointless. What if I could help? No. You don't even know what I was going to offer. Doesn't matter. I don't take money from men I barely know. That's how you end up in situations where you owe things you never agreed to pay. Nathaniel sat back, stung, but understanding her logic. I wasn't trying to buy anything. Maybe not consciously, but money is never neutral, Nathaniel. It always comes with strings, even when people swear it doesn't. She softened slightly. I appreciate the impulse, really, but I need to do this myself. They finished their pie in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. Just two people sitting with the complicated truth that good intentions didn't erase power imbalances or make charity feel less condescending. Carol brought the check. Nathaniel grabbed it before Lily could, and she didn't fight him on it. Some battles weren't worth fighting. Walk with me, Lily said as they left the diner. Where to? Nowhere specific. I just don't want to go home yet. They walked through rain that had diminished to a drizzle, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched against the damp cold. Chicago stretched out around them in shades of gray, buildings and streets and parks all blending into the particular colorlessness that came with early spring rain. I used to walk with my mother, Lily said. Every Sunday after dinner, we'd walk for hours. She'd recite poetry in French and make me translate it on the spot. I hated it when I was younger, thought it was this pretentious intellectual exercise that had no practical value. And now? Now I'd give anything to hear her voice doing that again. To struggle through Baudelaire while she corrected my pronunciation. She kicked at a puddle. Funny how the things that annoyed you become the things you miss most. Marcus gets frustrated when I try to read with him, says I do the voices wrong, that his mom did them better. Do you keep trying? Sometimes, when I have energy. Nathaniel watched water run along the curb, carrying debris toward the storm drains. Most nights I'm too tired or too busy, and I tell myself he's old enough to read on his own anyway. He's 7. I know. He's not old enough to read on his own, not when what he really wants is his father's attention. The words settled heavy between them. Nathaniel knew she was right, had known it for years but found it easier to pretend work was more urgent than bedtime stories, that Marcus would be fine with the nanny, that childhood was long enough that missing a few months wouldn't matter. Except months turned into years, and years turned into a 7-year-old who asked if his father was honoring his dead mother's lessons about kindness. "You're good at this," he said. "At what?" "Cutting through my bullshit." "It's not that hard. Your bullshit isn't particularly sophisticated." She glanced at him. "You're not a bad person, Nathaniel. You're just a person who stopped paying attention to what mattered. That's fixable." "Is it?" "If you actually want to fix it, yes. If you just want to feel better about being broken, no." They'd reached Grant Park without consciously deciding to go there. The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving everything wet and clean and somehow more vivid than before. Tourists were emerging from wherever they'd sheltered, taking photos and complaining about the weather in a dozen languages. Lily led them to a bench overlooking the lake. The water was choppy and gray, whitecaps visible even from this distance. Nathaniel sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, but not quite. "Can I tell you what I'm afraid of?" he said. "Always. That I've already ruined Marcus. That the damage is done and no amount of museum trips or bedtime stories will undo 4 years of emotional neglect. That he'll grow up to be like me, successful and hollow and incapable of real connection. That's a lot of fear. I have a lot to be afraid of." Lily turned to face him fully. "You want me to tell you that your son will be fine? That one good weekend erases years of absence? I can't do that. I don't know Marcus. I don't know what scars he's carrying or how deep they go." "Then what can you tell me?" "That kids are resilient, that 7 is young enough that patterns can still change, that showing up now is better than never showing up at all." She paused. "And that you're not actually asking if Marcus will be okay. You're asking if I think you're redeemable." Nathaniel looked out at the lake, at the endless gray water that didn't care about human drama. "Am I? Everyone's redeemable if they actually do the work, but you have to want redemption more than you want comfort, more than you want success, more than you want people to think well of you." She stood up. "And I can't answer whether you want it that much. Only you know that." She started walking back toward the street. Nathaniel followed, something tight in his chest that might have been fear or might have been hope. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Home. I have another shift tomorrow morning and I need sleep." "Can I see you again?" Lily stopped walking. For a long moment she just stood there, wet pavement reflecting gray sky, looking at him with those eyes that saw through expensive suits to the mess underneath. "Why?" she asked. "Because talking to you makes me want to be better. Not perform better. Actually be better." "That's not my job, Nathaniel. I'm not your therapist or your life coach or your motivation. I'm just a person trying to survive my own life." "I know. And I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm just asking to know you, to have these conversations, to keep learning how to be honest with someone who doesn't need me to be anything other than what I am." "And what are you?" The question hung in the damp air between them. Nathaniel thought about all the ways he could answer: CEO, father, widower, businessman, success story, failure, lost. All true, none complete. "I don't know anymore," he said, "but I think I want to find out." Lily studied him for another long moment, then pulled out her phone. "Give me your number." He did. She typed it in, saved it, slipped her phone back in her pocket. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "Not dates or relationship or whatever you think this might become. But if you actually want to do the work, with your son, with yourself, I'll answer when you text. I'll have coffee with you sometimes. I'll tell you when you're being an idiot, which will probably be often. That's all I'm asking. No, it's not. But it's all I'm offering right now, so take it or leave it." "I'll take it." She smiled then, small but real. "Good. Now go home to your kid. Read him a story. Do the voices wrong. Let him correct you. That's where this starts. What about you? I'm going to walk home in the rain, take a hot shower, and read French poetry until I fall asleep. My usual Sunday night. That sounds lonely. It is. But it's mine. She stepped closer, reached up, and touched his face briefly. You're going to be okay, Nathaniel. You and Marcus both. But only if you actually show up for it. Then she was walking away, her figure disappearing into the Sunday evening crowd of tourists and locals and everyone in between. Nathaniel watched her go, feeling something shift in his chest. Not fixed, not healed, but maybe, possibly, beginning to crack open in a way that could eventually let light in. He pulled out his phone and texted Teresa, I'm coming home. Tell Marcus I'll read tonight. The response came quickly. He'll be thrilled. Don't screw it up. Nathaniel smiled and started walking back to where his driver was waiting. The rain had left Chicago cleaner somehow, washed of the accumulated grime that built up during dry spells. Everything looked sharper, more real. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Lily. Forgot to ask. Did you read the Camus book? He typed back. Started it. The main character is depressing as hell. 3 dots appeared. Then, keep reading. It gets worse before it gets better. Kind of like life. Nathaniel laughed out loud, earning a strange look from a passing jogger. He climbed into the car and told James to take him home, then settled back and finished typing his response. Same time next week? I'll bring better conversation topics. Maybe. If you've actually done your homework with Marcus, deal. The car pulled into traffic. Nathaniel watched the city slide past his window, thinking about everything Lily had said. About redemption requiring work. About showing up. About authenticity being radical in a world built on performance. He thought about Marcus waiting at home, probably already in pajamas, probably already choosing which book he wanted his father to read. About doing the voices wrong because he'd never been good at that, and Sarah had been. About letting his son correct him. About being present even when, especially when, it was uncomfortable. The penthouse felt different when Nathaniel walked in. Still enormous, still expensive, but maybe less empty than it had been. Teresa was in the kitchen making dinner. Marcus was in his room exactly as predicted. Nathaniel knocked on the doorframe. Hey, buddy. Marcus looked up from his book, eyes widening. You're home early. Yeah, I thought maybe we could read together before bed. Really? Really. Pick whatever you want. Marcus scrambled off his bed and ran to his bookshelf, scanning titles with the seriousness of someone making a life-or-death decision. He finally pulled out a battered copy of The Phantom Toll Booth and handed it to Nathaniel. This one, Chapter 7, that's where we stopped last time. Last time had been 4 months ago. Nathaniel had forgotten they'd even started this book. The bookmark was still in place, a piece of construction paper Marcus had made in school with his name written in careful block letters. They settled onto Marcus's bed together. Nathaniel opened the book and started reading. He did the voices wrong, exactly as Lily had predicted. Marcus corrected him. No, Dad, talk is supposed to sound gruff, not squeaky. And Nathaniel tried again. Still wrong, but closer. They read 2 chapters instead of 1. By the end, Marcus was leaning against his father's side, nearly asleep but fighting it the way he always did. Dad, Marcus murmured. Yeah? Who are you with today? A friend. Her name's Lily. Is she nice? Nathaniel thought about it. Yeah, she's nice and smart. And she doesn't let me get away with being lazy about important things. Like what? Like spending time with you. She said 7 isn't old enough to read on your own. Marcus perked up slightly. I told you that. I know. I should have listened sooner. Are you going to see her again? Maybe. Is that okay with you? Marcus considered this with the gravity of someone far older than 7. Does she make you happy? She makes me want to be better. That's not quite the same thing. Close enough, Marcus yawned. I like her already. Nathaniel kissed his son's forehead and tucked him in properly, turning off the light and leaving the door cracked the way Marcus preferred. He stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to his son's breathing even out into sleep, feeling the weight of everything he'd almost lost by being too busy to notice what mattered. His phone buzzed. Another text from Lily. How'd it go? He smiled and typed, voices still terrible, son still patient with me, progress. That's all anyone can ask. Nathaniel went to his own room, changed into sweatpants, and picked up the Camus book again. He read another 3 chapters, following Meursault's strange journey toward the only honest thing left when everything else was stripped away. Around midnight, he set the book down and stared at the ceiling, thinking about authenticity and performance and the radical act of showing up as who you actually were instead of who you thought you should be. It was terrifying, but maybe, possibly, worth it. The week that followed felt different in ways Nathaniel couldn't quite articulate. He still went to meetings, still made decisions that affected thousands of employees, still performed the role of successful CEO with the precision he'd spent years perfecting. But something had shifted beneath the performance, some awareness that he was performing at all. Tuesday morning, Robert caught him staring out the window during a budget review instead of reading the quarterly projections. "You're doing it again," Robert said. "Doing what?" "That thing where you're physically present but mentally somewhere else. Used to only happen when you were planning a hostile takeover. Now it just looks like you're daydreaming." Nathaniel turned back to the spreadsheet on his screen. "I'm listening." "You're definitely not listening. I just said we were proposing a 15% budget increase for our janitorial staff, and you didn't even blink. The old you would have demanded 3 different cost-benefit analyses before approving that." "Maybe the old me was an asshole." Robert set down his tablet. "Okay, what happened? And don't say nothing because you've been weird since Friday. Did the waitress thing go badly?" "Her name is Lily. And no, it didn't go badly." "So it went well?" "It went honestly, which is apparently more uncomfortable than badly." "I have no idea what that means." Nathaniel thought about trying to explain, about Camus and authenticity and the radical act of showing up as who you actually were, about how Lily had held up a mirror and forced him to look at what he'd become, about reading to Marcus with terrible voices and feeling more present in those 30 minutes than he'd felt in months of board meetings. Instead, he said, "Approve the budget increase. People who clean up after us deserve better." Robert stared at him. "Who are you and what have you done with my boss?" "Still figuring that out." The rest of Tuesday passed in a blur of conference calls and contract negotiations. Nathaniel participated in all of it, said the right things, made the necessary decisions. But part of his attention kept drifting to his phone, waiting for a text from Lily that might not come. It finally arrived at 7:30, just as he was leaving the office. "How's the homework going?" He smiled despite his exhaustion and typed back, "Read 3 chapters tonight." Marcus fell asleep during the 3rd one. "I'm calling that a win." "That's definitely a win. Same coffee shop Sunday?" "I'll be there." Wednesday brought an unexpected complication. Nathaniel's mother called, a rare occurrence that usually meant something had gone wrong. She lived in Florida now, in a retirement community that catered to wealthy widows who'd outlived their self-made husbands. They talked maybe once a month, brief conversations that felt more like obligation than connection. "I heard you took Marcus to a museum," she said without preamble. "News travels fast. Teresa mentioned it when I called to check on my grandson. Said you spent the whole day with him, canceled meetings and everything." Nathaniel waited for the criticism. His mother had strong opinions about how he should be running his life, most of which involved working less and dating more. She'd been pushing him toward remarriage since Sarah's funeral, convinced that Marcus needed a mother figure and Nathaniel needed someone to manage his emotional incompetence. But the criticism didn't come. Instead, she said, "Good. It's about time." "That's it? No lecture about how I should have been doing this all along?" "Oh, you absolutely should have been doing this all along. But I learned years ago that lecturing you is pointless. You only change when you decide to change." She paused. "What made you decide?" Nathaniel thought about how to answer that without getting into Lily, knowing his mother would immediately turn it into something it wasn't. "Marcus asked me if I was honoring the things Sarah taught him, made me realize I wasn't. That boy is too smart for his own good. He gets it from his grandmother." "Damn right he does." His mother's voice softened. "How are you really doing, Nathaniel? And don't give me the standard fine that you give everyone else." "I'm tired, lonely, trying to figure out how to be a better father while still running a company that employs 14,000 people, mostly failing at both." "You're not failing, you're learning. There's a difference." Lily said something similar. The words were out before he could stop them. His mother pounced immediately. "Who's Lily?" "Nobody. A friend." "You don't have friends. You have employees and business associates and people you're strategically aligned with. So, who is she really? Nathaniel sighed. His mother had always been impossible to lie to. A woman I met. She works at a restaurant. We've had coffee a couple times. And she's making you think about being a better father? Among other things. I like her already. His mother's tone turned serious. Nathaniel, honey, I know you loved Sarah. I know losing her broke something in you that might never fully heal. But you're 32 years old. You can't spend the rest of your life hiding behind work and guilt. I'm not hiding. You're absolutely hiding. Have been for 4 years. And I understand why. I did the same thing after your father died. Threw myself into charity work and social clubs and anything that would keep me from sitting still long enough to feel the loss. She paused. But eventually, you have to stop running. Eventually, you have to let yourself be human again. And if I don't know how anymore, then you learn. With help, if you're smart enough to accept it. His mother's voice gentled. This Lily woman. Does she make you feel human? Nathaniel thought about Sunday afternoon, about walking through rain and sitting in terrible diners and being seen without pretense. Yeah, she does. Then don't screw it up. They talked for another 10 minutes about Marcus and school and whether Nathaniel would bring his son to Florida for spring break. His mother extended an invitation that sounded more like a command, and Nathaniel found himself agreeing just to end the conversation before she could ask more questions about Lily. Thursday morning brought a crisis at work. One of their key researchers had been poached by a competitor, taking proprietary information with him. Nathaniel spent 6 hours in emergency meetings with legal, trying to contain the damage and figure out their response. The old Nathaniel would have been furious, would have immediately started planning retribution. But this Nathaniel mostly felt tired. We should sue, his general counsel recommended. Send a message that this kind of betrayal has consequences. Or we could just let him go, Nathaniel said. The conference room went silent. His entire legal team stared at him like he'd suggested they burn the building down. Sir, his general counsel said carefully, if he's unhappy enough to leave and our competitor values him enough to steal him, maybe we weren't the right fit anymore. Maybe we should focus on making sure our remaining researchers are happy instead of punishing someone for leaving. That's not how this works. Why not? Because if word gets out that people can leave without consequences, everyone will leave. Or, Nathaniel said slowly, working through the thought as he spoke, if word gets out that we care more about employee satisfaction than corporate revenge, the people who stay will actually want to be here. And the ones who leave are the ones who wouldn't have been loyal anyway. His general counsel looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't quite find the words. Finally, he said, This is very unlike you. I know. But I'm trying something different, so no lawsuit. Send him a polite exit letter, wish him well, and let's spend that legal budget on retention bonuses for the team he's leaving behind. The meeting ended with confusion but compliance. After everyone left, Robert lingered behind. That was weird, he said. Which part? All of it. The old you would have gone for blood, would have sued him into oblivion just to prove a point. The old me was exhausting to be. Fair. But where's this coming from? This sudden philosophical shift toward compassion and letting things go? Nathaniel picked up his phone, saw a text from Lily that had come in during the meeting. Heard you approved raises for cleaning staff. Harold's niece works for your company. She says people are confused but happy. Keep going. He showed the text to Robert. From someone who keeps reminding me that not everything has to be a war. Huh. Robert read the message twice. This waitress is having a profound effect on you. Her name is Lily, and yes, she is. Should I be worried? About what? About you losing your edge, about turning into one of those CEOs who meditates and talks about mindfulness and lets the company drift because they're too busy finding themselves. Nathaniel considered this. It was a fair concern. He'd seen it happen. Successful leaders who burned out, overcorrected toward softer leadership, and lost their companies in the process. But that wasn't what was happening here. At least he didn't think it was. I'm not losing my edge, he said finally. I'm trying to figure out what edge actually matters. Destroying a researcher who left doesn't serve the company. It just feeds my ego. Making sure the people who stayed feel valued, that serves the company. And Lily taught you that? Lily taught me to question whether the things I think matter actually matter. The rest I'm figuring out myself. Robert nodded slowly. Okay, but if you start talking about chakras or installing a meditation room, I'm staging an intervention. Friday afternoon, Nathaniel left work early, another unprecedented move that had his assistant looking concerned. He drove to Marcus's school himself instead of sending the driver, arriving 10 minutes before dismissal. Other parents were already gathering by the doors, mostly mothers, but a few fathers scattered in the crowd. Nathaniel recognized some of them from school events he'd mostly skipped. One woman, Karen, maybe, mother of a kid in Marcus's class, approached him with obvious surprise. Nathaniel, I didn't know you did pickup. Usually I don't, trying to change that. Well, it's nice to see you. Marcus talks about you all the time. He does? During sharing circle. He's very proud of what you do, always telling the other kids about your company and the important meetings you have. She smiled. Last week he told everyone his dad was too busy to read to him, but that it was okay because important people had important work. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Nathaniel tried to keep his expression neutral. That's not okay, actually. Oh, I didn't mean... No, you're right to mention it. I've been letting work take priority over my son, and that needs to change. Karen looked uncomfortable, probably regretting saying anything. I'm sure you're doing your best. My best hasn't been good enough, but I'm working on it. The school doors opened and children poured out in the chaotic way they always did. Backpacks flying, voices loud, energy boundless after a day of forced stillness. Marcus emerged near the middle of the crowd, saw Nathaniel standing there, and his face lit up in a way that made Nathaniel's chest hurt. Dad, you're here? I'm here, buddy. Thought we could grab ice cream before dinner. Really? Really? Unless you have homework that can't wait. Homework can totally wait. Marcus grabbed his father's hand. Can we go to the place with the waffle cones? Wherever you want. They walked to the car together, Marcus chattering about his day with the unfiltered enthusiasm of someone who didn't yet know to perform cool detachment. He talked about math class and recess and the friend who'd brought hamsters for show and tell. Nathaniel listened, really listened, trying to absorb every detail of his son's life that he'd been too busy to notice. At the ice cream shop, they sat at a small table by the window. Marcus got chocolate with sprinkles, his standard order since he was 3 years old. Nathaniel got vanilla because he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten ice cream, and vanilla seemed safe. Dad? Marcus said around a mouthful of chocolate. Yeah? Are you okay? What do you mean? You've been different this week. Home more, reading more, actually listening when I talk. Marcus studied him with those two old eyes. Did something happen? Nathaniel thought about how to explain it in terms a 7-year-old would understand. I met someone who reminded me what's important, and I realized I'd been forgetting that for a long time. Is it Lily, the friend you mentioned? Yeah, it's Lily. Is she your girlfriend? No, just a friend. Do you want her to be your girlfriend? The question was so direct, so innocent, that Nathaniel laughed despite himself. I don't know, buddy. It's complicated. Why? Because your mom died, and I still miss her, and it feels wrong to want to be close to someone else. Marcus ate his ice cream thoughtfully. Mom would want you to be happy. You think so? She told me. Before she got really sick. She said if anything happened to her, I had to make sure you didn't stay sad forever. His voice dropped. I don't think I did a very good job. Nathaniel reached across the table and took his son's hand. You did a perfect job. You stayed brave and smart and kind even when everything was terrible. That's more than anyone should have asked of you. But you're still sad. Sometimes. But less than I was. And part of that is because of you. And part of it is because I'm finally trying to actually deal with it instead of just working until I'm too tired to feel anything. They finished their ice cream and drove home through Friday afternoon traffic. Marcus fell asleep in the back seat, chocolate still smudged on his face. Nathaniel watched him in the rear-view mirror, the small person who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who carried his own grief while worrying about his father's. When had Marcus become the parent in this relationship? Saturday arrived with the same museum trip that had quickly become their new tradition. This time they explored the natural history exhibits. Marcus was particularly fascinated by the taxidermied lions and asked approximately 900 questions about predator behavior. Nathaniel didn't have answers for most of them, But he pulled out his phone and they looked things up together, reading Wikipedia articles about savanna ecosystems and pack hunting strategies. Lunch was hot dogs from the same vendor as last week. They sat on the same bench, watching the same lake, falling into a comfortable rhythm that felt almost normal. "Can I meet her?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Meet who?" "Lily. If she's important enough that she changed how you act, I want to meet her." Nathaniel wasn't sure how to respond to that. He and Lily weren't dating, barely knew each other, certainly weren't at the stage where introducing children to each other made sense. But Marcus was looking at him with such hopeful curiosity that refusing felt wrong. "Let me talk to her first," he said. "See if she's comfortable with that." Why wouldn't she be comfortable? Because meeting your friend's kid is a big step. It means something. What does it mean? It means things are serious. And we're not serious, we're just figuring things out. Marcus accepted this with a shrug and went back to his hot dog. But Nathaniel could see the wheels turning in his son's head, processing this information in whatever way 7-year-olds processed adult relationships. That evening, after Marcus was asleep, Nathaniel texted Lily. "Random question. Would you ever want to meet my son?" The response took 10 minutes to arrive. "That's a very loaded question for a Saturday night." "I know. You can say no. It's not that I want to say no. It's that meeting someone's kid feels significant, like we're moving toward something I'm not sure we're moving toward. We're not moving toward anything. I just thought if we're going to keep having these conversations, Marcus should know you exist. He already knows your name. Asked if you were my girlfriend today. What did you tell him? That you're a friend because that's what you are." Another long pause. Then, "Okay, but somewhere neutral. Not your place or mine, and not a restaurant where I might know people from work. The museum. Sunday afternoon after our coffee? That works. But Nathaniel, this doesn't change anything. I'm not auditioning to be his mother or your partner or anything other than a person who knows you both. I know. And that's exactly why I want him to meet you." Sunday morning felt different knowing what the afternoon would bring. Nathaniel woke up anxious, which was ridiculous. This wasn't a date. This was just 3 people spending time together in a public place. Nothing significant, nothing weighted with expectation. He told himself this repeatedly while getting dressed, while making breakfast, while reading the paper and completely failing to absorb any information from it. Marcus noticed. "You're nervous." "I'm not nervous. You made pancakes and they're not terrible. You only cook well when you're anxious about something." "When did you become so perceptive?" "I've always been perceptive. You're only noticing now because you're actually paying attention." Fair point. They spent the morning doing laundry and cleaning Marcus's room, a task that revealed approximately 15 books hidden under the bed, and 3 science experiments that had been abandoned mid-process. Nathaniel made Marcus throw away the experiments before whatever was growing in them became sentient. At 2:30, Nathaniel left for his coffee meeting with Lily. Marcus stayed with Teresa, with instructions to be ready at 4 when his father came back to pick him up. Millie's was slightly more crowded than last week. Apparently Sunday afternoons were popular despite the terrible coffee and depressing ambiance. Lily was already there, sitting in the same booth they'd occupied before, reading a book with a French title Nathaniel didn't recognize. She looked up when he approached. "You're early." "So are you." "I'm always early, hazard of growing up with academic parents who treated tardiness like a moral failing." She closed the book. "You're nervous. Marcus said the same thing this morning." "Smart kid. Is he nervous too?" "Excited mostly. He's been asking about you since yesterday." "No pressure there." Carol appeared with coffee neither of them had ordered. "You two again, becoming regulars." "Is that allowed?" Lily asked. "Only if you keep tipping like your friend here does. Man tips like he's trying to single-handedly solve income inequality." She disappeared before Nathaniel could respond. Lily was smiling. "She's not wrong," Lily said. "That 50 you left last week was excessive. It's coffee money. I spend more than that on a single bottle of wine. And I spend that on groceries for 2 weeks. Different worlds." They fell into their familiar pattern of conversation, easy but honest, touching on topics both light and heavy. Lily talked about her week waiting tables, about the regular customer who always asked for modifications that made his order impossible, about the couple who'd had a screaming fight in the middle of dinner service. Nathaniel talked about letting the researcher go, about his mother's phone call, about Marcus's comment that important people had important work. That must have hurt to hear, Lily said. It clarified things, made me realize what Marcus has been telling himself to cope with my absence. Kids are good at that, making excuses for adults who disappoint them. Is that what you did? With your parents? Lily was quiet for a moment. My parents never disappointed me. They were just so consumed by their own intellectual pursuits that they sometimes forgot I existed. Not maliciously, just abstractedly. Like I was a beloved piece of furniture they occasionally remembered to dust. That sounds lonely. It was. But it also made me self-sufficient, which has its own value. They talked until almost 4 when Nathaniel needed to leave to collect Marcus. Lily paid this time, insisted on it despite Nathaniel's protests, and they walked out into the cool afternoon together. You're still nervous, she observed. What if he doesn't like you? Then he doesn't like me. Kids are allowed to have opinions. But what if... Nathaniel. She stopped walking and turned to face him. This is just 3 people meeting, nothing more. No expectations, no auditions, no pressure. If Marcus and I get along, great. If we don't, that's also fine. It doesn't change anything between you and me. Doesn't it? Why would it? Because if my son matters to me and you matter to me, then how you feel about each other inherently matters to me. Lily studied him with those eyes that always seemed to see more than he wanted to reveal. You're in your head about this. I'm in my head about everything. Fair, but try to get out of your head for the next hour. Just let whatever happens happen. They drove separately to the museum, Lily in her aging Honda, Nathaniel in his Tesla. Marcus was waiting on the front steps with Teresa, practically vibrating with excitement. He spotted Nathaniel's car and started waving before they'd even parked. Nathaniel made introductions in the museum lobby. Marcus, this is my friend Lily. Lily, this is Marcus. Marcus stuck out his hand with the formal politeness Sarah had drilled into him. Nice to meet you. Lily shook it seriously. Nice to meet you too. Your dad says you're into mummies right now. I'm into lots of dead things. Mummies, dinosaurs, that taxidermied lion upstairs. Charming, Lily said, but she was smiling. Do you like dead things? I like old things. Books, mostly. Languages. Stories that have been around for hundreds of years. Marcus considered this. That's basically dead things, too. Just different kinds. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. They started walking through the museum, Marcus leading the way with the confidence of someone who'd been here twice in 2 weeks and considered himself an expert. He pointed out exhibits he thought Lily should see, explained facts he'd learned from the guides, asked questions that ranged from insightful to bizarre. Nathaniel hung back slightly, watching them interact. Lily treated Marcus like a person rather than a child, listening to his explanations without condescension, asking genuine questions, admitting when she didn't know something. Marcus responded by being himself, unfiltered and enthusiastic and occasionally weird in the way 7-year-olds were. They ended up in the Ancient Americas exhibit. Marcus was fascinated by the Aztec section, asking how they built pyramids without modern tools. Lily knew more than expected about Mesoamerican architecture, something about a documentary she'd watched while learning Spanish. Your brain is like a museum, Marcus observed. How so? It's full of random stuff that doesn't necessarily connect, but is interesting anyway. Lily laughed. That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me a know-it-all. They grabbed hot chocolate from the museum cafe and sat at a table overlooking the dinosaur hall. Marcus drank his too fast and got whipped cream on his nose. Lily pointed it out without making a big deal of it. Marcus wiped it off and kept talking, explaining his theory that velociraptors would beat lions in a fight because of superior intelligence and pack hunting strategies. What about one-on-one, Lily asked. Lion wins. Size advantage. But doesn't the velociraptor have better weapons? The claw situation? Doesn't matter if the lion gets the first hit, and lions are ambush predators. They definitely get the first hit. They debated predator advantages for 10 minutes. Nathaniel just listened, watching his son light up in a way he rarely did with adults. Marcus was usually so careful around grown-ups, trying to say the right things, performing intelligence instead of just being intelligent. But with Lily, he dropped that performance entirely. Eventually, Marcus excused himself to go to the bathroom. The moment he was out of earshot, Nathaniel turned to Lily. Thank you. For what? For being yourself with him. For not treating him like a tragedy or a responsibility or something fragile. He's not fragile, he's resilient. Lily finished her hot chocolate. He's also lonely. You can see it in how he talks, like he's used to being the only kid in adult spaces. He spends most of his time with Teresa, who's lovely, I'm sure, but isn't his peer. He needs friends his own age, activities, things that aren't about being grown up. I've tried signing him up for stuff. Soccer, swimming, art classes. He hates all of it. Because you're signing him up for what you think he should like, not what he actually likes. Lily paused. Has he told you what interests him? Dead things, apparently. So find him activities about dead things. Natural history clubs, junior archaeology programs. Whatever lets him be weird in the specific way he's weird. Nathaniel pulled out his phone and started searching. Within 5 minutes, he'd found 3 programs. A weekend fossil hunting group, a junior naturalist program at the zoo, and a dinosaur camp that ran during summer. He showed Lily the results. Which one? Ask him. Marcus returned from the bathroom, and Nathaniel showed him the options. His son's eyes went wide. All of them, Marcus said immediately. Pick one to start. Why? Because... Nathaniel stopped. Why was he limiting this? Because of scheduling? Because 3 activities seemed excessive? Because he was used to conserving resources even when resources weren't the issue? You're right, he said. All of them. We'll make it work. Marcus threw his arms around his father's waist, squeezing tight. Over his son's head, Nathaniel met Lily's eyes. She was smiling. They spent another hour in the museum before Marcus's energy finally started to flag. Outside in the parking lot, goodbyes felt awkward in a way the rest of the afternoon hadn't. Marcus solved it by hugging Lily first. Can you come to museum day next week? Lily looked at Nathaniel. He tried to communicate that she could say no, that there was no obligation, that she'd already given more than enough by showing up today. Maybe, she said, if I don't have to work. You should quit your job, Marcus announced. Then you'd have time for important stuff like museums. Buddy, Nathaniel started, but Lily was laughing. You know what? You're not wrong, but quitting requires having enough money saved up, and I'm not there yet. How much do you need? Marcus, Nathaniel said firmly. That's not a polite question. Why not? If she needs money and Dad has money, he should just give it to her. Then she could quit and be less tired all the time. Lily knelt down to Marcus's level. That's a very sweet thought, but I need to save the money myself. It's important to me that I do this on my own, without help. Does that make sense? Marcus thought about it. I guess, but it seems inefficient. A lot of important things are inefficient. They said their final goodbyes and separated into different cars. Marcus talked the entire drive home about Lily, how she knew about pyramids, how she didn't talk to him like a baby, how she admitted when she didn't know things instead of pretending. I like her, Marcus concluded. You should marry her. Nathaniel nearly drove off the road. What? You should marry her. Then she could come to museum day every week. Marcus, marriage doesn't work like that. Why not? Because people don't get married just so they can go to museums together. They get married because they love each other and want to build a life together. Don't you love her? I barely know her. But you like her. Yes, I like her. And she makes you less sad. Yes. And she's nice to me. Also, yes. Then what's the problem? Nathaniel tried to figure out how to explain adult relationship complexity to a 7-year-old. The problem is that Lily has her own life, her own goals, her own reasons for doing things the way she does them. And I can't just decide we're getting married because it would be convenient. Did you decide that with Mom? The question caught Nathaniel off guard. Your mom and I dated for 2 years before we got married. We knew each other very well. But didn't you know pretty fast that you wanted to marry her? I did, yeah. So it's the same thing. It's really not, buddy. But Marcus had already moved on to planning his fossil hunting expedition, explaining what tools he'd need and whether they'd find a T-Rex skull. Nathaniel let him talk, his mind still caught on his son's simple logic. Did he want to marry Lily? The question was absurd. They'd known each other for less than 2 weeks, had spent maybe 10 hours total in each other's company, hadn't even kissed or held hands or done any of the things people typically did before considering marriage. But there was something there. Something that felt significant in a way Nathaniel couldn't quite name. Not love, Not yet, but the potential for love. The recognition of someone who could matter in ways he'd forgotten people could matter. That evening, after Marcus was in bed, Nathaniel texted Lily, "Thank you for today. Marcus hasn't stopped talking about you." The response came quickly. "He's wonderful. You're doing better than you think. He asked if we were getting married." Nathaniel could almost hear her laughing through the phone. Kids are efficient problem solvers. Why waste time on dating when you could skip straight to the museum buddies for life plan? He thinks you should quit your job and come to museum day every week. Your son has excellent ideas, but questionable understanding of how employment works. Nathaniel hesitated over his next message, typed and deleted it 3 times before finally sending, "Would you want to? Come to museum day, I mean. Not the marriage thing. Unless you're interested in that too, in which case we should probably discuss it first." Her response took longer this time. "Are you asking as Marcus's dad or as yourself? Both? Then yes. I'd like to spend more time with you, both of you. But slowly. No pressure, no expectations, no 7-year-olds planning our wedding. Deal." Nathaniel set down his phone and went to the window, looking out over Chicago's nighttime sprawl. Somewhere out there, Lily was probably reading French poetry in her small apartment. Marcus was dreaming about fossils and velociraptors in his room down the hall, and Nathaniel was standing in an expensive penthouse feeling more connected to actual life than he had in 4 years. It wasn't perfect, wasn't easy, wasn't the smooth resolution he'd once thought he needed, but it was real, and maybe, possibly, that was enough. The following Tuesday brought rain again, the kind that started before dawn and showed no signs of stopping. Nathaniel woke to the sound of it against the windows and lay in bed for a moment, listening to the rhythm. He'd slept better than usual. No nightmares about Sarah, no 3 a.m. anxiety about work deadlines. Just solid, dreamless sleep that left him feeling almost rested. His phone showed 2 messages, one from Marcus's school about an upcoming science fair, one from Lily, sent at 6:30. "Have you finished the Camus book yet?" He typed back, "Almost. Still waiting for it to get better like you promised. It doesn't get better. It gets honest. There's a difference." Nathaniel smiled and got out of bed. The apartment was quiet. Marcus still asleep, Teresa not arriving for another hour. He made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, watching rain turn the city gray and soft. Somewhere down there, people were starting their days, going to jobs they hated or loved or tolerated, raising kids, paying bills, trying to figure out how to survive one more week, living ordinary lives that were simultaneously mundane and miraculous. When had he stopped seeing that? When had other people's lives become just background noise to his own ambition? Marcus appeared around 7, already dressed in clothes that didn't match, but that he'd clearly chosen himself. "Is Lily coming to fossil hunting on Saturday?" "I don't know. She has to check her work schedule." "Can you ask her?" "I texted her yesterday, buddy. I can't just keep texting until she answers." "Why not?" "Because that's pushy. People need space." Marcus considered this while pouring cereal with the excessive concentration of someone who'd been told multiple times not to spill. "Do you think she likes us?" "I think she likes us fine. But does she like us enough to keep coming to stuff?" Nathaniel sat down across from his son. "What's really worrying you?" "Nothing." "Marcus." His son was quiet for a long moment, pushing cereal around his bowl. Finally, "What if she disappears like Mom did?" The words landed heavy in the morning quiet. Nathaniel felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but opening. Making room for a conversation he should have had years ago. "Lily's not going to die," he said gently. "You don't know that." "You're right. I don't know that for certain. But she's healthy and she's careful, and there's no reason to think anything bad will happen to her." There was no reason to think anything bad would happen to Mom either, until there was. Nathaniel moved to sit beside Marcus, putting an arm around his small shoulders. "You're scared of caring about people because you're afraid of losing them. Aren't you?" "Yeah, buddy, I am. That's why I've spent 4 years avoiding everyone except you. Why I threw myself into work instead of making friends or dating or letting anyone matter. Because if they don't matter, they can't hurt me when they leave." Did it work? No. I was still lonely, still hurting, just in different ways. Nathaniel tightened his grip. "But here's what I'm learning. The pain of losing someone you love is terrible, the worst thing in the world. But the pain of never letting anyone close enough to lose is worse, because at least when you lose someone, you had something real first, had love and connection and all the good stuff that came before the loss. Marcus leaned into his father's side. So we should let Lily matter? I think we should let ourselves care about people again. Lily, yes, but also other people. Friends for you at school. Maybe eventually someone for me who isn't just a business associate. We should let the world back in, even knowing it might hurt us. That's scary. Terrifying. But also the only way to actually live instead of just surviving. They sat together while Marcus finished his breakfast and Nathaniel drank his coffee. Outside, rain continued its steady percussion against glass and stone. Teresa arrived and started making her rounds, tidying things that didn't need tidying in that way she had of giving them space while still being present. Work that day was a series of meetings Nathaniel only half attended. His mind kept wandering to conversations with Lily, to Marcus's fear of loss, to the Camus book still sitting on his nightstand. During the afternoon budget review, he caught himself staring out the window again. Robert cleared his throat. Should I just email you the rest of this? Sorry. What did I miss? Everything. You've been gone for 20 minutes. Robert closed his laptop. Okay, what's going on? And don't say nothing because you've been distracted all week. Nathaniel thought about deflecting, then decided against it. Marcus asked me this morning if we should let Lily matter, if it was worth risking caring about someone again. Heavy breakfast conversation. He's worried about losing people, about letting anyone close enough to hurt him. Kid's been through trauma. Makes sense he'd be guarded. I've been modeling that guardedness for 4 years, showing him through my own behavior that the safe thing is to keep everyone at arm's length. Nathaniel rubbed his eyes. What kind of father teaches his son to be afraid of connection? The kind who's trying to protect himself and his kid from more pain. You're not a villain here, Nathaniel. You're just a person who got hurt and responded the way hurt people do. By hurting my son in different ways. By surviving. There's a difference. The conversation moved back to budgets and projections, but Nathaniel's mind stayed stuck on Robert's words. By surviving. As if survival was somehow separate from living. As if you could do one without the other and call it success. He left work early again. A pattern now, rather than an exception. Picked up Marcus from school and took him for ice cream despite the rain. They sat in the car, eating their cones, watching water stream down the windshield. I asked Lily to come to fossil hunting, Nathaniel said. What did she say? She said she'd try, but her schedule is unpredictable. Because of the restaurant job she hates. She doesn't hate it, she's just tired of it. Same thing. Marcus had a point. Nathaniel thought about Lily moving through that restaurant with careful invisibility, enduring the subtle condescension of wealthy customers who assumed she lacked intelligence or ambition. Thought about her studying Mandarin in a 400-square-foot apartment with heat that barely worked. Thought about all the ways poverty made talent irrelevant and potential meaningless. What if I offered her a job? He said suddenly. Marcus looked at him with interest. Doing what? I don't know, something at the company. We need translators sometimes, for international contracts, or she could work in communications, or… Dad. Yeah? You can't just hire her because you like her. That's weird. Why is it weird if it's a legitimate job? Because she'll think you're trying to rescue her. And she doesn't want to be rescued. She told you that already. Nathaniel stared at his 7-year-old son. When did you get so smart? I was always smart. You're only noticing now. Marcus finished his ice cream. If you want to help her, ask what she actually needs instead of deciding for her. Wednesday evening, Nathaniel texted Lily. Hypothetically, if you could quit your restaurant job tomorrow, what would you need to make that happen? The response took an hour. Why are you asking? Just curious about what financial security actually looks like for you. That's a weird thing to be curious about. I'm a weird person. Humor me. Another pause. Then, 6 months of living expenses saved, so roughly $12,000, plus insurance coverage until I found something else. Why? No reason. Just trying to understand your situation better. Nathaniel, if you're thinking about offering me money, don't. I'm not. You're definitely thinking about it. Okay, I was thinking about it. But I'm not going to do it because my very wise 7-year-old told me that would be condescending. Your son is smarter than you. I'm aware. Thursday brought unexpected complications. One of Nathaniel's board members, Harrison, a 65-year-old industry veteran who'd been with the company since Nathaniel's father ran it, requested an urgent meeting. They sat in Nathaniel's office while rain continued its multi-day assault on Chicago. "I'm concerned," Harrison said without preamble. "About? About you. About your recent behavior. About the direction you're taking this company." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. "You're going to need to be more specific. You let a key researcher walk away without consequences. You approved budget increases that will impact our margins. You've been leaving early multiple times a week. You're distracted in meetings." Harrison ticked items off on his fingers. "And according to several people, you've been spending time with a waitress. Her name is Lily, and my personal life is none of the board's business. It is when it affects your judgment. How is my judgment affected? You're going soft, making decisions based on sentiment rather than strategy. That's not the leader this company needs." Nathaniel felt anger rise in his chest, the old familiar heat that had fueled so many successful negotiations and hostile confrontations. But underneath it was something else, something that asked whether Harrison was wrong. "What kind of leader does this company need?" he asked quietly. "Someone ruthless, someone willing to make hard choices, someone who prioritizes profit and growth over feelings and fairness. And if I don't want to be that person anymore?" Harrison's expression turned grave. "Then maybe you shouldn't be leading this company." The words should have felt threatening. Instead, they felt almost liberating. Nathaniel looked at this man who'd mentored him for years, who taught him everything about running a pharmaceutical empire, who represented the exact kind of leadership Nathaniel had spent a decade emulating. "You might be right," Nathaniel said. Harrison blinked. "I'm sorry? Maybe I shouldn't be leading this company. Not if leadership requires being someone I don't want to be. This is about the waitress. This is about me realizing that success means nothing if it requires sacrificing every other part of my humanity. If I have to choose between being a good CEO and being a good father, being a good person, being someone my son can actually be proud of, I'm choosing the second option. That's naive. Maybe, but I watched my wife die at 30. I've watched my son grow up without me because I was too busy building an empire I don't even enjoy running. I've spent 4 years performing success while feeling completely empty inside." Nathaniel stood up. "So yeah, I'm making different choices now. Softer choices, if that's what you want to call them. And if the board doesn't like it, they're welcome to replace me." Harrison stared at him for a long moment. "You've changed." "I'm trying to. That's the point. This woman, Lily, she's responsible for this transformation. She's part of it. But mostly it's me finally paying attention to what matters instead of what looks impressive." Harrison left without another word. Nathaniel sat back down and pulled out his phone, typing a message to Lily before he could overthink it. "I might lose my job for going soft. Thought you should know your influence is having measurable consequences." Her response was immediate. "What happened?" "Board member thinks I'm making sentimental decisions instead of strategic ones." "He's probably right." "And I told him if being strategic means being someone I hate, I'd rather be someone else. That's either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both?" "Probably is both." "Are you okay?" "Honestly, I feel better than I have in years. Might be unemployed soon, but at least I'll be honest. You're not going to lose your job, but if you do, you'll figure it out. Rich people always land on their feet." "That's cynical. That's realistic. But I appreciate the existential crisis you're having." Shows character development. Nathaniel smiled despite everything. Friday afternoon, Marcus's science fair arrived with all the chaos that elementary school events always brought. Nathaniel had completely forgotten about it until Marcus mentioned it at breakfast, then spent 2 hours in panicked preparation helping his son put together a presentation on predator adaptations. It was hastily assembled and barely coherent, but Marcus was proud of it. The gym was packed with parents and students and science projects of varying quality. Nathaniel spotted other fathers in business suits, clearly having come straight from work. Saw mothers who'd taken the afternoon off, who'd probably spent weeks helping their children prepare. Saw the usual mix of family configurations that made up any school event. And standing near the door, looking completely out of place in jeans and a sweater, was Lily. She spotted him at the same moment. Their eyes met across the crowded gym, and she offered a small wave. Nathaniel navigated through the crowd toward her. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Marcus texted me this morning, said it was his science fair and he wanted me to see his project." "Marcus texted you?" "Apparently you put my number in his iPad. He's very resourceful." Nathaniel made a mental note to discuss boundaries with his son later. "You didn't have to come." "I know, but I wanted to." She looked around the gym. "Where is he?" They found Marcus at his station, practically vibrating with nervous energy. When he saw Lily, his entire face lit up. "You came!" "Of course I came. I'm not missing a presentation on predator adaptations." Marcus launched into his explanation with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting all day to share. He talked about ambush versus pursuit predators, about the evolutionary advantages of pack hunting, about why certain animals developed specific traits. Most of it was information he'd absorbed from museum visits and documentaries, reorganized into his own understanding. Lily listened with the same serious attention she'd given him at the museum, asked questions that pushed his thinking, admitted when she didn't understand something, treated the whole thing like it mattered, because to Marcus, it did. The judges came by eventually, two teachers who looked exhausted from evaluating dozens of projects. They asked Marcus questions he answered confidently, made notes on their clipboards, moved on to the next station. "You did great," Lily said after they left. "Do you think I'll win?" "I think you explained complex concepts clearly. That's what matters." "But do you think I'll win?" "Probably not. That girl over there has a working volcano, and judges love volcanoes." Marcus laughed. "Yeah, volcanoes are pretty cool." They walked around looking at other projects. The aforementioned volcano, a presentation on renewable energy, something involving magnets that none of them fully understood. Nathaniel hung back slightly, watching Lily and Marcus interact with the easy comfort of people who genuinely liked each other. Other parents noticed. Karen from pickup approached them with obvious curiosity. "Nathaniel, hi, is this your—" She paused, clearly unsure how to phrase the question. "This is Lily," Nathaniel said. "A friend." "Friend," Karen repeated in a tone that suggested she didn't believe that for a second. "Well, it's nice to meet you. Marcus talks about you constantly." Lily shot Nathaniel a look. He shrugged helplessly. They escaped Karen's interrogation and found a quiet corner near the water fountain. Marcus had run off to look at the volcano up close, leaving the adults alone. "This is weird for you," Nathaniel observed. "What is?" "Being here, at a school event, with me and my kid. People are staring." "People are always staring. I'm used to it." But Lily shifted uncomfortably. "Though this is different. Usually when people stare at me, it's because I'm serving them food. This feels more evaluative. They're trying to figure out who you are." "And who am I?" "I don't know yet. What do you want to be?" Lily was quiet for a moment, watching Marcus across the gym. "I want to be someone who matters to that kid. Not as a replacement for his mother, but as someone who shows up when she says she will. Someone who treats him like he's worth listening to." "You're already that person. For now. But what happens when this gets complicated? When it stops being fun museum trips and science fairs and becomes actual responsibility? Actual commitment? Is that what you're worried about? That I'm expecting commitment you're not ready to give? I'm worried that your son is getting attached to me and I'm getting attached to him, and neither of us has really talked about what that means." Nathaniel pulled her to a more private corner, away from curious parents and children. "Okay, let's talk about it. What does it mean?" "You tell me. You're the one who invited me into your life. I invited you because talking to you makes me feel human again, because you see through my bullshit, because my son lights up when you're around in ways he doesn't with anyone else." Nathaniel paused. "And because somewhere in the past few weeks, you stopped being just the waitress I insulted and became someone I can't imagine not knowing." Lily's expression was unreadable. "That's a lot." "Too much? I don't know. Maybe." She looked down at her hands. "I'm still figuring out how to survive my own life, Nathaniel. I can barely manage work and rent and the constant anxiety about money. Adding relationship complexity to that feels overwhelming." "Then don't. Just be yourself. Show up when you can. Leave when you need to. No pressure. Except there is pressure. From Marcus, who's already planning which museum we're visiting next week. From your board members who apparently think I'm corrupting you. From that woman who just asked if I was your girlfriend. Lily met his eyes. And from me, because I like you. Both of you. More than is probably smart. Before Nathaniel could respond, Marcus returned with news that the volcano had malfunctioned spectacularly, coating one of the judges in baking soda foam. They went to investigate and found a crowd gathered around the disaster, the girl who'd made it crying while her parents tried to clean up. Lily moved immediately to help, grabbing paper towels and speaking softly to the girl. Hey, it's okay. Sometimes science experiments go wrong. That's how we learn. But I practiced so many times, the girl sobbed. I know, but you know what? 20 years from now, you're going to tell this story at parties about how your volcano attacked a teacher at the science fair. It'll be hilarious. The girl sniffled. Really? Trust me. The best stories come from when things go wrong, not when they go perfectly. Nathaniel watched Lily comfort this stranger's child with the same natural compassion she showed Marcus. Watched her turn disaster into something manageable. Watched her be exactly who she was without pretense or performance. He was falling in love with her, had maybe already fallen. The realization should have terrified him, but instead it felt inevitable. The science fair wrapped up around 6. Marcus didn't win. The volcano girl got second place despite the explosion, and first went to the renewable energy presentation. But Marcus didn't seem disappointed. He was too busy planning the fossil hunting trip for Saturday and asking if Lily could come. If I can, she said. I'm still waiting on my schedule. You said that last time. Because it's still true, kiddo. Some of us have jobs we can't just skip. In the parking lot, saying goodbye felt harder than it should have. Marcus hugged Lily without hesitation. She hugged him back, and Nathaniel saw something shift in her expression, something that looked like tenderness and terror in equal measure. Thank you for coming, Nathaniel said. Thank you for the invitation. Even if it came from your son and not you. I would have invited you. I just didn't want to push. I know. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so Marcus wouldn't hear. I need to tell you something. Okay? I gave my notice at the restaurant 2 weeks. After that, I'm unemployed. Nathaniel's heart jumped. Why? Because I have enough saved now, not the full 6 months I wanted, but enough to try. And because you were right, I was letting fear keep me stuck in a situation that was killing me slowly. She smiled. I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway. What will you do? Figure it out. Apply for translation work. Look into teaching positions. Maybe travel for a few weeks if I can afford it. I don't know yet, but I'm choosing uncertainty over slow death. That's incredibly brave. That's incredibly stupid, but I'm tired of being smart and safe and miserable. Marcus was getting impatient, asking when they were leaving. Lily stepped back, creating distance between them again. Go, she said. I'll text you about Saturday. Nathaniel drove Marcus home through evening traffic, his mind spinning. Lily had quit, was choosing risk over security, was stepping into uncertainty with nothing guaranteed. Part of him wanted to fix it, to offer her money or a job or some safety net, but he knew that wasn't what she needed. She needed to do this herself, to prove to herself that she could survive without rescue. All he could do was be there, show up, be present for whatever came next. Saturday morning arrived clear and cold. The fossil hunting group met at a park 40 minutes outside the city. Nathaniel had signed Marcus up for the full program, 6 weeks of weekend excavations with other kids interested in paleontology. His son was practically shaking with excitement. They arrived early. Other families were already gathering, parents and children with proper field gear and enthusiasm that matched Marcus's. Nathaniel felt out of place in his expensive outdoor clothing that had never actually been outside. Then Lily pulled up in her beat-up Honda, and everything felt less awkward. You came, Marcus shouted, running toward her. I came. I'm officially unemployed as of yesterday, so my schedule is suddenly very open. You quit? I quit. Marcus hugged her with the unselfconscious affection of a child who hadn't yet learned to guard his heart. Lily hugged him back, and over his head she met Nathaniel's eyes. How does it feel? Nathaniel asked when Marcus ran off to join the other kids. Terrifying, liberating, both at once. She looked around at the assembled families. Am I really spending my first day of unemployment digging for fossils with a 7-year-old? Apparently, this is either the best decision or the worst decision I've ever made. Can it be both? The program director called everyone together for introductions and safety instructions. Marcus attached himself to Lily's side like a barnacle, asking constant questions about what they might find. She answered patiently, admitting when she didn't know things but speculating with him about possibilities. They spent 3 hours carefully excavating in designated areas. Marcus found what the director said was probably a fragment of ancient marine life. Nothing spectacular, but enough to make him feel like a real paleontologist. Lily found a rock she insisted looked like a potato. Nathaniel found dirt under his fingernails and a strange contentment in doing something completely unrelated to business or success. During a break, while Marcus compared findings with other kids, Nathaniel and Lily sat on a bench watching the group. "I could get used to this," Lily said. "Fossil hunting?" "Having time, not rushing between shifts, being able to say yes when a kid asks me to do something." She leaned back. "I forgot what this felt like." "What?" "Freedom. Even if it's temporary and financially irresponsible." "What if it wasn't temporary?" "It has to be temporary. I have rent, loans, reality." "But what if it didn't have to be? What if you had options?" Lily turned to look at him. "What are you asking, Nathaniel?" He'd been thinking about this all week, turning it over in his mind during meetings and late-night reading sessions, trying to find a way to help that didn't feel like rescue or condescension or purchasing something she wasn't selling. "My company needs a director of international communications," he said. "Someone who speaks multiple languages, understands cultural nuance, can translate complex technical information for different audiences. The position pays well, has benefits, flexible schedule so you could actually have a life." "You're offering me a job." "I'm telling you about an opening. What you do with that information is up to you." "That's a technicality." "It's accurate. We have the position. You have the qualifications. The fact that we know each other doesn't change that you'd be good at it." Lily was quiet for a long moment, watching Marcus try to explain his fossil fragment to a skeptical-looking girl. "I don't want to be someone you hire because you feel sorry for me. I feel a lot of things for you. Sorry isn't one of them." "Then what do you feel?" Nathaniel took a breath. This was it. The moment where he either said what was true or backed away into safety. "I feel like I've spent 4 years barely breathing, and knowing you is the first time I've wanted to actually live again. I feel like my son has more joy when you're around than he's had since his mother died. I feel like you're important to both of us in ways I'm probably not articulating well. Those aren't job qualifications. No. But they're reasons why I want you to stay in our lives. And if offering you employment that you're genuinely qualified for helps make that happen, I'm going to offer it. And if we..." Lily paused. "If whatever this is between us doesn't work out, if it gets messy or complicated, then you still have a job you're good at, that pays well, that gives you the stability you need. I'm not offering conditional employment based on personal relationship status. I'm offering a legitimate position to someone qualified to fill it." Marcus was running back toward them, something clutched in his hand. Lily stood up quickly, wiping her eyes even though she hadn't been crying. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. The rest of the day passed in a blur of dirt and discoveries and children's laughter. By afternoon, everyone was exhausted and happy. Parents gathered their kids and headed toward cars, already planning next week's session. In the parking lot, Marcus was too tired to even walk properly. Nathaniel carried him the last few yards, his son's head heavy on his shoulder. "Today was perfect," Marcus mumbled. "Yeah, it was." "Can we do this every week forever?" "We can do it for 6 weeks. After that, we'll find something else." Lily appeared beside them, her clothes dusty and her hair windblown. "I'm going to take the job." Nathaniel nearly dropped Marcus. "What?" "The position you mentioned. I'm going to apply for it, properly, with a resume and cover letter and everything. And if you hire me based on actual qualifications, and not because of whatever this is," she gestured between them, "then I'll take it." "You're sure?" "No, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway." She smiled. "Someone recently taught me that being terrified isn't a good reason to avoid good opportunities." They stood there in the parking lot, Nathaniel holding his half-asleep son, Lily covered in dirt and looking more alive than he'd ever seen her. Other families flowed around them, heading home to their ordinary lives full of ordinary complications. "Come to dinner," Nathaniel said impulsively. "When?" "Tonight, at my place. Nothing fancy, just the three of us, takeout and conversation." That feels significant. It is significant, but I'm tired of pretending it's not. Lily looked at him for a long moment, then at Marcus, then back at Nathaniel. "Okay, but I need to shower first. I'm covered in ancient dirt." 7 o'clock? 7 o'clock. That evening, Nathaniel's penthouse felt different with Lily in it. Less like a museum of expensive things and more like an actual home. They ordered Thai food and ate at the kitchen island while Marcus told them everything he'd learned about fossils, displaying his finds with the pride of someone who'd discovered buried treasure. After dinner, Marcus convinced Lily to read with him. They settled on the couch with the phantom toll booth while Nathaniel cleaned up. He could hear them through the doorway, Lily doing the voices better than he ever had, Marcus laughing and correcting her pronunciation of character names. This was what it could look like, he thought. Not perfect, not without complications, but real, honest, full of the small moments that actually mattered. By 8:30, Marcus was falling asleep on Lily's shoulder. She looked at Nathaniel with an expression that asked what to do. He gestured toward Marcus's bedroom. Together they got his son into pajamas and tucked into bed. Marcus mumbled something about velociraptors and fossils before sleep claimed him completely. Back in the living room, Lily stood at the windows looking out over the city. Nathaniel joined her, and they stood in silence watching lights flicker across the darkness. "I'm scared," Lily said finally. "Of what?" "Of mattering this much to you, to Marcus, of letting myself believe this could work." She turned to face him. "I've spent 6 years building walls, protecting myself, being self-sufficient because needing people was too dangerous. And now I'm starting to need you, both of you, and it's terrifying." Nathaniel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "I'm scared too," he said. "Sarah was my whole world. When she died, I thought that was it, that I'd had my chance at love and lost it, and the rest of my life would just be going through motions. And then you walked into my life and reminded me that there's more than one way to love, more than one chance." "I'm not Sarah." "I know. I don't want you to be. I want you to be exactly who you are, difficult and honest and challenging and real. I'm also broke and unemployed and have student loan debt you probably couldn't even imagine. You're also brilliant and brave and the first person in years who's made me want to be better instead of just more successful." Lily stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. "If we do this, if we actually try, it's going to be messy. I don't know how to date a billionaire, don't know how to be in Marcus's life without overstepping, don't know if I can handle your world. My world is just buildings and money and people performing success. It's not actually important." He touched her face gently. "You're important. Marcus is important. Everything else is just details we'll figure out together." "Together," Lily repeated. "I haven't had together in a long time." "Me neither." She kissed him then, soft and tentative and absolutely nothing like kissing Sarah had been. This was different, new, its own thing entirely. When they pulled apart, Lily was smiling. "This is still a terrible idea," she said. "Probably. Your board is going to hate me." "They already hate you. You're corrupting me toward compassion and human decency. Someone has to." They moved to the couch, sitting close but not quite touching, talking about everything and nothing, her plans for the interview, Marcus's upcoming birthday, the Camus book Nathaniel had finally finished. The conversation flowed like it always did with them, easy but meaningful. Around 11, Lily said she needed to go. Nathaniel walked her to the door, neither of them particularly eager for the evening to end. "Thank you," she said, "for dinner, for the job opportunity, for not giving up when I was prickly and difficult. Thank you for seeing me, the actual me, not the successful CEO version. The actual you is better than the CEO version anyway." She kissed him again, longer this time. Then she was gone, heading toward the elevator with a small wave. Nathaniel stood in the doorway long after she disappeared, feeling something settle in his chest. Not healing exactly, not fixed, but maybe beginning to understand that broken things could still function, could still hold value, could still be enough. The next morning, Marcus found him making pancakes and immediately knew something had changed. "You kissed her," Marcus announced. "How do you know that?" "Because you're making heart-shaped pancakes instead of regular circles. You only do shapes when you're happy." Nathaniel looked down at the pan. His son was right. He'd unconsciously made the pancake into a lopsided heart. "I did kiss her," he admitted. "Is that okay with you?" Marcus considered this seriously. "Is she going to be my new mom?" "No. She's going to be Lily, her own person. Someone who cares about both of us but isn't trying to replace anyone. Can she still come to museum days?" "I think she'd be disappointed if she couldn't." "Then it's okay." Marcus paused. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy? I'm glad you're not sad anymore, or at least not as sad." "Me too." And they ate their heart-shaped pancakes while making plans for the week. Marcus had his junior naturalist program on Wednesday, fossil hunting again on Saturday, a birthday party for a classmate on Sunday, a life that was slowly filling up with normal childhood things instead of just loneliness and grief. Nathaniel's phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Spent the night working on my application. Pretty sure I'm overqualified for your position, which is a strange feeling." He typed back, "Pretty sure you're overqualified for most positions. Just wait until you see what the job actually pays. Is it enough to afford heat that actually works? It's enough to afford heat that works, savings, travel, and probably a few other luxuries. That's obscene. That's market rate for someone with your skills. Don't undersell yourself." Another pause, then, "I'm really doing this, aren't I? Taking a job with a company run by someone I'm, whatever we are, dating." The word you're looking for is dating. Are we dating? I'd like to be, if you're willing. This violates so many professional boundaries. Probably. Does that change your answer? A longer pause this time. Nathaniel watched the 3 dots appear and disappear multiple times before her response finally came through. "No. I want to date you too, despite all my better judgment saying this is a terrible idea. The best things usually are terrible ideas at first. That's definitely not true, but I appreciate the sentiment." Monday morning, Lily submitted her application through the official company portal. Nathaniel made sure he wasn't part of the hiring committee. That job went to his head of communications and 2 department directors who didn't know about his personal connection to the candidate. He wanted this clean, legitimate, something Lily could take pride in regardless of their relationship. The interview happened Wednesday. Nathaniel stayed in his office, resisting the urge to check in or interfere. At 4 o'clock, his head of communications knocked on his door. "We need to talk about the heart application," she said. Nathaniel's stomach dropped. And she's perfect. Overqualified, honestly. Speaks 6 languages fluently, has advanced degrees in exactly the areas we need, and in the interview she demonstrated more cultural awareness than our entire current team combined. She paused. "Why is someone with her credentials working as a waitress?" "Personal circumstances. Family tragedy. It's complicated." "Well, we want to hire her. Assuming her references check out, which I can't imagine they won't. I'm just wondering why someone this talented is interested in our position. She could probably work anywhere." "Maybe she wants stability, benefits, a company that values what she brings." His head of communications studied him. "There's something you're not telling me." "There's a lot I'm not telling you, but none of it affects whether she's qualified for this position." "Fair enough. We'll extend the offer tomorrow." The offer came through Thursday morning. Salary, benefits, start date in 2 weeks. Lily called Nathaniel immediately. "This is too much money," she said. "It's market rate." "I've never made market rate in my life. I don't know what to do with this much money." "Save it, spend it, travel, pay down your loans, whatever you want. It's yours because you earned it, not because of me." "I still can't believe this is happening." "Believe it. You're officially corporate now." "That's the least sexy thing anyone's ever said to me." Nathaniel laughed. "Want to celebrate? Dinner tonight, somewhere nice, just the 2 of us." "That sounds like a date." "It is a date. Our first official one." "Shouldn't we have gone on actual dates before I accepted a job at your company?" "Probably, but we've never done things in the right order anyway." They met at a restaurant that was nice but not ostentatious, Lily's request. She arrived wearing a dress Nathaniel had never seen before, her hair down, looking nervous in a way he found endearing. "This is weird," she said after they'd ordered wine. "What is?" "Sitting across from you in a fancy restaurant. The last time we did this, you were mocking me and I was serving you. I was an asshole. You were. But you're better now," she smiled. "Character development." "Inspired by you." "Inspired by your son, mostly, and your own realization that the person you'd become wasn't who you wanted to be." Lily took a sip of wine. "I can't take credit for your growth. That's all you." "And what about your growth? Leaving the restaurant, taking the risk, applying for this job. That's terror masquerading as bravery. We'll see if it actually works." They talked through dinner about logistics and plans and what this new arrangement would look like. Lily would start in 2 weeks. Nathaniel would maintain professional distance at work. No special treatment, no public displays of affection, nothing that would make her coworkers question whether she'd earned her position. Outside of work, they'd figure things out as they went. "What about Marcus?" Lily asked over dessert. "What about him? How do we handle this with him? The dating, the working together, all of it. Honestly, we tell him the truth, that we care about each other, that we're trying to build something, but that nothing is guaranteed, that adults figure things out as they go, just like kids do. He's 7. Will he understand that? He's 7, and he's already survived more loss than most adults. He understands uncertainty better than anyone." Lily reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't want to hurt him, or you, but I can't promise I won't. I can't promise that either. All we can promise is to be honest, to show up, to try." "That's not very romantic." "It's realistic, which is better than romantic." After dinner, they walked through the city like they had that first night. The weather had finally turned, spring asserting itself after weeks of rain and cold. Everything smelled like growing things and possibility. "I've been thinking about what you said," Lily mentioned, "about authenticity being radical. That was your line, not mine, from your mother." "Right. But you've been living it, actually doing the work of being who you are instead of who you think you should be. Trying to, anyway. It's working. Marcus is happier. You're happier. Even your employees are happier, according to Harold's niece." "Harold's niece is a gossip." "True. But she's an accurate gossip." Lily stopped walking, pulled him toward a bench in a small park. "I want to try too, being authentic, being someone who doesn't just survive but actually lives." "What would that look like for you?" "I don't know yet. But I think it starts with letting myself believe I deserve good things, that I'm allowed to be happy without waiting for disaster, that wanting more than basic survival isn't selfish. It's not selfish. Tell that to my anxiety." They sat together while the city moved around them. Couples walking dogs, joggers finishing evening runs, teenagers being loud and careless in the way only teenagers could be, life happening in all its messy, complicated glory. "I love you," Nathaniel said suddenly. Lily went very still. "What?" "I love you. I know it's fast and probably too soon and definitely not something I should say on our first official date. But it's true, and I'm trying this honesty thing, so there it is." "Nathaniel, you don't have to say it back. I'm not expecting reciprocation. I just needed you to know." Lily was quiet for so long that Nathaniel started to worry he'd completely misread everything. But then she said very softly, "I love you too," which is terrifying and probably going to lead to disaster, but I do. Why would it lead to disaster? Because I don't know how to do this. How to be in love with someone who has so much while I have so little. How to be in Marcus's life without screwing him up. How to navigate your world when I barely understand my own. So we learn together, make mistakes, figure it out as we go. That's your answer to everything, figure it out. Do you have a better one? No, which is deeply frustrating. They kissed there on the bench while strangers walked past, and the city hummed around them. It wasn't perfect or cinematic or anything like the movies. It was just two people trying to be honest in a world that rewarded performance. The weeks that followed were messy and complicated and sometimes difficult. Lily started at Cross Healthcare Technologies and immediately proved herself invaluable. Her language skills and cultural understanding opened doors in international markets they'd been struggling to penetrate. She worked hard, stayed late, and refused any special consideration because of her relationship with the CEO. Some employees resented her anyway, assumed she'd slept her way into the position, made comments just loud enough for her to hear. Lily handled it with the same quiet grace she'd shown serving tables, refusing to engage with gossip or defend herself beyond the quality of her work. Nathaniel wanted to fire everyone who questioned her. Lily told him absolutely not. "Let me prove myself," she said. "Give me 6 months. If I haven't won them over by then, we'll reevaluate." She won most of them over in 3 months. With Marcus, things were equally complicated, but in different ways. He loved having Lily around, but sometimes he'd push boundaries, testing whether she'd leave like his mother had, acting out, then watching to see if she'd stay. It was exhausting and heartbreaking and completely normal for a child who'd experienced loss. Lily stayed, even when it was hard, even when Marcus screamed that she wasn't his mother and couldn't tell him what to do, even when Nathaniel apologized repeatedly for his son's behavior. "He's grieving," she said simply. "This is what grieving looks like at 7. We work through it together." And they did work through it, slowly, with setbacks and progress and moments of grace when Marcus would suddenly hug Lily and whisper, "Thank you for staying." 6 months after that first dinner at Aurelius, Nathaniel and Lily moved in together, not into the penthouse, but into a smaller place that felt more like a home than a museum. Marcus got a say in decorating his new room. Lily filled shelves with books in multiple languages. Nathaniel learned to cook actual meals instead of just ordering takeout. It wasn't perfect. They fought about money sometimes. Lily still struggled with the wealth disparity, still felt uncomfortable with expensive gifts. They fought about Marcus's schedule, about household responsibilities, about whether to get a dog. They fought like normal people in normal relationships, and then they figured it out. Marcus thrived. His junior naturalist program led to a summer camp, which led to a standing Saturday morning nature walk group with other kids. He made actual friends his own age, started bringing them home for play dates, became more confident, more willing to share parts of himself he'd been protecting. One evening, almost a year after they'd met, Nathaniel found Lily in the study reading French poetry like she had that first night. He sat beside her, and she leaned into him automatically. "Marcus asked me something today," she said. "What?" "If I was going to marry you." "What did you tell him?" "That I didn't know. That it wasn't something we'd talked about." She looked up at Nathaniel. "Was that the right answer?" "Do you want to talk about it?" "I don't know. Do you?" Nathaniel thought about it, about the life they'd built together, messy and imperfect and real, about Marcus's laughter when Lily did voices during their bedtime reading, about coming home to someone who challenged him and supported him in equal measure, about the difference between performing happiness and actually feeling it. "I think," he said slowly, "that I'd like to spend the rest of my life figuring things out with you, making mistakes together, being honest even when it's uncomfortable, building something that's ours instead of perfect." That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Good thing it's not a proposal. It's a statement of intent. And when it becomes an actual proposal, I'll probably do it better. Maybe. No promises. Lily laughed and kissed him. "I love you. Your terrible proposals and your anxiety and your billionaire guilt and all of it. I love you too. Your prickly independence and your student loan debt and your need to prove yourself even when you don't have to." They sat together reading, her French poetry, him a novel she'd recommended, while Marcus watched a documentary in the other room about prehistoric marine life. This was what it looked like, Nathaniel thought, not the performance of success or the appearance of happiness, just actual life, with all its complications and grace. His phone buzzed with a message from Robert. "Board meeting tomorrow. Harrison's still pushing for you to be more ruthless. Thought you should know." Nathaniel typed back, "Let him push. I know who I am now. That's worth more than board approval." Good answer. "How's domestic life?" "Complicated. Messy. Better than anything else I've ever built." Later that night, after Marcus was asleep, Nathaniel and Lily stood at the window of their new home, looking out over a much humbler view than the penthouse had offered. No lake, no sprawling city lights, just a neighborhood with trees and streetlights and people living ordinary lives. "Do you miss it?" Lily asked. "The penthouse, the luxury, the version of your life before I crashed into it." "Every day," Nathaniel said honestly. Lily stiffened. I miss how simple it was, he continued, how I never had to question anything or feel uncertain or risk getting hurt. I miss the emotional distance that made everything easier. He pulled her closer. But I wouldn't trade what we have for that simplicity. Not for anything. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because hard means it matters, means I'm actually living instead of just surviving. Lily turned in his arms to face him. I have something to tell you. Okay. I got accepted to a PhD program. Comparative literature, full funding. Nathaniel's heart stuttered. Where? Here, Northwestern. I could do it part-time while working. It would take longer, but it's possible. You applied without telling me? I needed to know I could get in on my own merit, without your influence or connections, just me and my qualifications. She searched his face. Are you angry? I'm proud of you. And a little hurt you didn't mention you were applying, but mostly proud. I didn't want to jinx it. Or have you tried to help in ways that would make me question whether I earned it? Fair. But Lily, you know you can tell me things, right? Even when you're scared of my reaction? I know. I'm still learning how to let people in. She paused. The program starts in fall. I'd have to cut back hours at work. We'd need to figure out logistics. So we'll figure out logistics. That's what we do. They stood together planning the future, class schedules and childcare coordination, and how to balance work and school and relationship. Making lists and solving problems and being partners in the most basic, beautiful sense of the word. This was what love looked like after loss, Nathaniel realized. Not the desperate grip of fear, not the performance of romance, just two broken people choosing each other daily, building something imperfect but real from the wreckage of what came before. Marcus wandered into the living room around midnight, unable to sleep. Bad dream? Nathaniel asked. No, just thinking. Marcus climbed onto the couch between them. Are we okay now? What do you mean? Like, as a family, are we going to be okay? Lily and Nathaniel looked at each other over his head. I think so, buddy, Nathaniel said. We're not perfect. We'll still have hard days, but yeah, I think we're going to be okay. Good. Marcus leaned against Lily's shoulder. I like being okay. Me too, Lily said softly. They sat together while the city settled into sleep around them. Three people who'd found each other through pain and humiliation and the radical act of being honest. Three people building a family that looked nothing like what any of them had planned, but everything like what they needed. It wasn't the ending Nathaniel had imagined when he'd walked into that restaurant and mocked a quiet waitress over a wine mistake. But it was better than anything he could have designed. Messier, certainly. More complicated, but real in ways that performance and perfection could never be. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of people worth struggling alongside. Not the perfect life, but the honest one. Not survival, but actual living. The rest would figure itself out. Together.